Hello, hello, hello. You hear me, Danny?
I hear you loud and clear.
All right.
The great outdoors.
Good. Those are all off.
I love the cicadas in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's so Chicago.
Yeah, it's nice to have the ambient noise.
Yeah, we had Sarah's brother out here like a month ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have cicadas in Colorado. They don't know what they are. So we're sorry they missed it because the weekend after we started hearing cicadas.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Feeling good?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, man. Good.
Oh, it's all plugged in.
Yeah, it should be. Can you hear it? You could give me a test there on the mic?
Test.
Yeah, that sounds good. You
Okay.
can hear everybody? Danny, give
Yep.
me a check.
1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right. In lieu of our that's gonna be good.
That's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Imagine at night, it's like 2 in the morning, you hear caution
You get
hear it?
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if the window's open.
Oh shit.
No, there's pluses and minuses to being it right in front of the bus stop, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're headed west on Belmont.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna. You know what? I'm gonna give ourselves a round of applause. Just for pulling this off.
Oh, are we going?
Yeah, we're going.
Good job,
Yeah,
guys.
let's just
Good
do it.
job.
This is the way we do it. This is it.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna do one of these. Hold on, Danny, because do you know what this is?
I can't hear
This
it.
episode. Do you hear this? Do you hear it? You don't hear any of that?
No.
You don't hear me?
I hear you.
Okay.
Are you playing something in the background?
I'm playing nothing, but I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
play something now.
Okay. Yes.
You know what that's for, Danny?
Tell me.
That's because it's our 50th podcast.
Are you kidding?
This
50?
Stage 50 of the Bike Shop Society
Holy
podcast.
cow! I can't believe that.
Yeah, see? You just do them.
Dude. I thought I would have guessed like 30 something.
No, see? You just keep racking them
Holy
up.
shit.
Stage 50. Not bad. I think that's a milestone.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Longest Tour de France ever.
Yeah, Adrian LaTrace joining us on our on this very special episode of Bike Shop Society.
Very special.
There you go. There you go.
Reminds me of those those songs where it's like real trap shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Old school. Old school. How are you, Dan McMahon?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Good. It's been a long time.
It's been ages.
It's been a while. It's been, I don't know, a couple of episodes since we've recorded together.
It's been a while because the last one you had your buddies,
Charlie and Ed.
Charlie and Ed, Big Ed on the south side, and
Mhm.
Charlie, who I don't think I've ever met, but they had a lot of cool stuff to talk about. It was fun to listen to that. That was a good episode.
Yeah, it was fun. It was just kind of fun to reconnect with those guys. I've been trying to. Ed is actually back at the bike shop a day a week, so I've got him back. You know, they're good bike shop people. Like I have them trained. You know, like they've worked for me. I've trained them. They know what to do and how to work with me, and I like them. But they're on to bigger and better things as most people, that leave the bike shop go off to do. Or not always, but
That was a little bit around just post Naked Bike Ride, I think.
it was like the week after the Chicago Naked Bike Ride, which was a lot of fun. And
We have so much to talk about.
yeah, that's right, man. There's so many things have happened since the Naked Bike Ride and since our last. Well, I don't know, when was our last podcast? It was episode 48.
It was a while, man.
So it was.
I definitely listened to it, but I don't remember when it was.
Yeah, that was about a month ago.
Yeah.
It was about a month ago.
A
So
whole big bike race happened since then too.
a gigantic bike race over in Europe.
You might say the biggest.
Some people consider it the biggest bike race. And you guys also
Road trip.
Yeah, you guys had a road trip. That's why Adrian is here. Or, besides we just like Adrian.
And we like his
Little day
backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nice. You can hear. It's pretty wild hearing the cicadas. How
Yeah,
loud they are.
Yeah.
So Chicago.
That's a common noise, I guess, right? Ambient
This is,
sound.
this
in
is the
city of
episode for
Chicago.
people to listen to if they want to like go to sleep
Yeah,
and have
exactly.
some background nature.
It's like one of those apps,
nature noises. Yeah.
Yeah, there's cicadas,
sounds.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're in Chicago at in AJ's backyard.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're recording outside
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, it's about 7:40 p.m. Sunday, and beautiful evening.
Al fresco.
I was gonna say this has probably been the nicest summer since I can remember
Yeah,
in Chicago.
yeah.
Probably since I was in college. I think
Really?
we've had some really nice.
I feel like it's been really good.
except the smoke, that 2 weeks of the wildfire smoke. Otherwise,
Yeah.
the weather's just been amazing.
It's been really nice nights, like
Mhm.
like really, like this time of the day.
Mhm.
Just beautiful. Some really good evening rides this year.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah. Have you been out a little bit? Have you had the chance
Not too much. I've been going to Clark Park a lot. It's over on Addison
Mm-hmm.
and the river, and I just got that kayak earlier this summer,
Oh, nice.
so I've been taking that out. There's like a boat launch right there and a kayak launch,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just finished building a. You guys remember Specialized Street Stomper? That
No,
bike.
what
I don't
was
think
it?
so.
It's like a stump jumper, but like a hybrid.
Okay. Or like
And
big
so-
tires, kind of like like a big boy BMX bike.
It's like the same geometry as like a 80s stump jumper.
Okay.
But yeah, I just rebuilt that, so I've been kind of just doing little cruises around the neighborhood.
Wow.
Cruising over to Metropolitan Brewing over there too.
Mhm.
You have
So,
gears on that thing, or is it one by? or
Yeah,
what do you-
no, it's like a old school 3
Okay.
by 6.
Yeah.
So-
Perfect.
Yeah, let me see if I got a photo.
Nice, man. That's really cool. I didn't know you had that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So that's your running around town bike.
Yeah, it's been
Okay.
really nice. Like I in the evenings, I have a little bike stand, and I've just been
Tinkering with.
yeah, I just set up the bike stand right over here by the
Mhm.
door and just tinker around on that one, on the Waterford.
very
So
cool.
Was this like a reissued, like something they reissued?
No, it's like that's like an actual bike from like 88.
Oh, it's an original bike that you just
Yeah.
restored. Okay, I
Yeah.
misunderstood.
Where'd you pick it up? eBay or something?
No, just Facebook.
It's a beautiful
Guy
bike.
in Wicker Park.
Oh, really? You had
So-
that, huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, I like.
You get a good deal on it?
Yeah, it's like $125.
Oh, geez,
Holy
that's
cow.
a steal.
But I mean, I
The,
put
the handlebar alone. Did you put that handlebar?
yeah, I put
Oh,
the,
okay, you
the
put
handlebar alone was like
yeah.
$100.
Yeah, the handlebar alone's
the-
$100.
the
That bend in the fork is everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
It is nice, like, you know,
Cool.
not super old, but old enough that I kind of like
Yeah.
Oh,
a nice kind of chilled out.
Got a little
geometry
chopper
for-
vibe.
Yeah, exactly. So-
the bike that I ride, like for the naked ride, for the whenever I come down to the city, like do one of those rides, that or like one of the critical masses or something.
Mhm.
I ride an old stump jumper, like a '90s
Mm.
stump jumper.
That's a cool bike too.
Yeah, just I've actually put I'm usually rushing out the door to do the ride or something, so I threw an adjustable stem on there and just put the handlebars up at a reasonable height. Because
it is pretty wild how that's like the really trendy thing right now.
hmm
And obviously we've seen the trends working in bike
Mhm.
shops over
Yep.
the years. And I mean, you remember back in the day, it was like all the Japanese NJS or
yeah.
track stuff, and now it's like 90s mountain bikes.
Well, it's the sweet spot for guys like us.
Mhm.
It's stuff that we're familiar with. It's stuff that we like. It's cheap to buy out there, and so it's really.
so plentiful.
So today this week, a guy brought in a Trek 720,
Mhm.
cheap bike back in the day. I mean,
Sold.
$350, $325 bike
Yeah.
retail back in the day. But he's had it since college, since his glory days living downtown in the city, and he loved his bike. And I said, I'm like, he's like, you think this thing is worth fixing? And I said, yeah, of course it is, man. It's essentially like a Surly frame, I mean, it's a nice frame.
They're,
It's,
they're really nice frames.
yeah, they're nice steel, well-made steel frames. There was no such thing as a cheap those bikes weren't cheap back in the day.
Well, they're really sought after now, like those multi-track, the 700
Mhm.
series, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can fit 50s in them,
Mm-hmm.
700 by 50.
Yep.
So you can get some like really fat,
Yeah.
huge tires on those old hybrid bikes.
So long story short, I convinced the guy to like spend $500 to redo it.
Nice.
And, like new wheels, tires, basically rebuild the bike from a frame for him for around $500. And it's sweet. It's like 1x9, modern build,
Kinda
but,
modern,
upright
yeah.
handlebars, just a sweet bike. And another customer came in today with a Trek 750, which was a way nicer frame, like lugged.
I've got one of those in the garage.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
With the lugs? The lug, yeah.
lug
It's a
frame.
How many bikes you got, dude?
I have a bunch.
Uh-huh.
Every time I talk to you, you're like, "Yeah, I got this new bike." I'm like, "Another one?"
Yeah, True
I'm
Temper.
kinda jealous.
Yeah, it's
Well, yeah,
they're-
like True Temper, like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
really nice
a
frames.
pretty. The lugs are really pretty, built in the
I'm
United.
sorry. What did I've always heard that term? What does it true temper actually mean?
It's the tubing.
Mm-hmm.
The brand of tubing.
It's the brand.
It's the brand name.
Yeah.
So it's like saying Columbus or
Correct.
Mhm.
whatever. Okay, True Temper. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and True Temper made steel for like tools and baseball bats and sports equipment.
Okay.
And, yeah, all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and like Easton. Easton made frames
So
for
a
there was
trademark,
Easton
yeah.
aluminum for mountain bikes back in the
I
day.
learned so much on this podcast.
But the guy saw the bike that we redid, and he's like, "I want that for my bike." And I'm like, take that one out for a ride. And he zipped it around the park. He's like, "Oh my God, you could do that for me?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I could do that for you." And he left it, and he's doing that for his bike. So it's just,
amazing.
it feels really good to get those bikes going again.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that own them are really excited to like be able to continue riding their bike for another 20 or 30 years, like another 20 years or whatever. Like, as one guy said, he's like, whatever I have left, this is the bike I get to ride that bike. And I'm like, yeah, your whole life. Yeah.
It could be his forever bike.
I mean, that is cool that is like,
Yeah.
especially if that's the bike that they were riding in college
Yeah.
or wherever. And
Yeah, downtown. I get him to admit, he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm married now with kids and stuff, but I used to ride this to my girlfriend's house.
Is that his bike or your default voice for anyone who's like of that age?
These guys. So I'm like, being in the suburbs, I'm surrounded by like guys my age
Mm-hmm.
who have like 2 or 3 kids and moved to the suburbs 25 years ago or 20 years ago.
Pretty classic.
And so I can spot them coming from a mile away, especially when they walk up with a bike like that. And that bike happened to be from Cycle Smithy. So it
Get
had
outta here.
so it had a Cycle Smithy sticker on it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I'll see a lot of Village Cycle stickers.
Yeah.
So Cozy stickers. So anytime I see one of those, I'm just like,
Pretty easy to trace it.
oh yeah, any woman that comes in, around that age, and I see those old bikes, I'm like, yeah, this is when you were,
Yep.
I'm like, this is when you're running around footloose, fancy free down in Lincoln Park,
Yeah.
right? And they, they're just like, wow, you got me nailed. I'm like, I used to sell bikes to you all day long, so I know exactly.
Yes.
I know exactly where you're coming from, and he was so happy. He's like, I'm so glad you could do this for me. I'm like, yeah, man. He's like, you can buy a brand new $900 hybrid bike. It's not going to be any better than actually this is way cooler, and it's going to end up way nicer than.
totally.
And it's got some backstory to it.
Well, that's what kind of got me into those cheap 90s hybrid bikes was I was looking at, I think actually it was kind of inspired by Danny. I was looking at getting like a state,
Mhm.
newer,
Yeah.
almost like kind of city neighborhood cruiser type deal. And then I'm like, well, shit, like I could get a, 700 or 720
Mm-hmm.
Trek for like the the 720 I have, I got it for literally for $30.
Oh yeah,
On
yeah,
Facebook Marketplace.
yeah.
And I'm just like, for that price, I mean, you can't beat that.
It's worth it just for
know?
the frame.
Oh, totally.
It's just for the frame. And if you can, scrounge up some parts to build it, and you can build them so cheap, and it doesn't take much to get those things going. Like new, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and some of these frames are getting more sought after, like those 750s,
I
the
know.
lug steel, and then there's like a certain colorway of stump jumpers and rock hoppers from like the late 80s. It kind of
The neon.
the pink and
Yeah.
teal.
Funky type and decals.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like whenever those list, they're like $300.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even just with the old dry rotted tires
Yeah.
and haven't been touched in 30
Yeah.
years. So
Got like a Miami Vice vibe almost.
and they sell them. I mean, people list them for $200-300 and they're gone.
Yeah, I drove like 25,
So
30 miles out to, I don't know, St. Charles or something to pick up an old Hard Rock, but it was mint. It was like mint Hard Rock. I had a friend looking for a small, like a 16-inch frame, and I'm like, I keep my eye open for it.
Mhm.
And I was able to get one for like $150. It needed tires, and those bikes aren't great. They're not great mountain bikes anymore, but you put some upright handlebars on there, they're great cruisers.
Mhm.
As is, you're a little too bent over to be truly comfortable on them.
Mhm.
But you put some upright bars on there, which requires just recabling the bike, and man, they're awesome. They're awesome.
There's so much joy to be had in like finding like a good deal, like that perfect bike online, and going out and picking it up. It's like such a fun thing you don't get from just like ordering a bike online.
Yeah. Well, especially like the stuff that I'm selling brand new in the store, and I mean, I'm not selling, I guess, because I haven't ordered anything this year.
Really?
I haven't ordered like your traditional hybrid bike or anything. I just haven't. I'm not into it, And
You can actually set up alerts on. You used to be able to, like on Craigslist and stuff. You can set up alerts, so like with keywords, and you'll get an email if someone lists something with keywords. So if you put in like rock hopper or whatever,
oh, nice.
you'll get like an email. I did that back in the day for something. It was probably something bike related, but it worked. I got it, and I went on. Oh, actually, it was an apartment. Sorry, I was looking for an apartment, and I had a price range. Like you put in a lot of criteria, and I got the email, and I was like first one on it.
Oh, wow.
They're like, "How did you hear about this?" I'm like, Craigslist. They're like, "We just put it up like 7 minutes ago." I'm like, alerts, baby.
Hey, man. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, like obviously with algorithms and stuff now, it's like if you save a couple old 90s mountain bikes on Facebook Marketplace, the next time you log in, that's the first thing that will come up because like it just knows. And
For better or worse.
yeah, and I think also too, like over the winter, I thought, well, I could make this into a little side hustle, fix up, especially if I can get a bike for 30 or 50
I saw you post something about that.
Yeah, so that street stomper I listed for like $1 gajillion. I'm like, let's just see, let's see what happens. But also it's kind of like, yeah, I hate to sort of feel like at least like millennial generation, we're always like monetizing our free time, but it's sort of like something to do, it's something fun. And, the other thing too is, there's always like new adventures with this stuff too. Cause like I'm learning obviously, and there's been a lot of changes in, talking about like 1x9s or 10s or whatever, and the technology. But, my new thing now is like I've been watching all these videos on YouTube of guys who've built their own cargo bikes, like the front loaded cargo bikes. Cause I see them a lot. Like I take my kid to Kosciuszko Park, which is like maybe about half a mile away or so, or maybe a mile. And every time I go over there, there's always at least like 1 or 2 family bikes over there.
Wow.
This is totally that area.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, those are cool. And then you look them up and they're like $5-6 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're like the Ubas and all those.
And that's understandable. I mean, that's not like that crazy for a car replacement bicycle, but I don't have that.
And a lot of them are
now.
e-bikes now too.
And a lot of them are e-bikes, but it is pretty wild. You can, like, it seems really, really complicated, but it seems like there's a lot of different ways to actually.
So you're gonna just get into like some soldering and welding kind of stuff, and get in the garage and
basically
sparks going. Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, we'll see. The first one, if I screw it up, then it was a $30 frame.
It's a project.
Then the next one. So
there you go.
But yeah, I just think it'd be fun to like actually like ride with my kid over to the park.
Oh, that'd be great.
So
I've seen a lot of them. I'm sure we all have, and see them around the city. And it's I don't know. There's that famous quote. I forget who said it, but when I see someone on a bike, it gives me more faith in humanity or something. Whatever that famous quote is. But I see like people commuting with kids and like their groceries. Like they're totally committed. Like 1 or 2 kids in there. They got the huge front part out there. They've got groceries, and they're not doing it to be cool. They're just like out there and they're running their errands. And I'm like, good for you, man. Like,
yeah, it's wild how far it's come, because I was working at bike shops when commuting wasn't really a thing yet in the city. There were a handful of dudes that were riding their bike to work. I don't even know if they were necessary. They were just riding.
I was going to say they didn't even call it
They
commuting.
didn't even call it commuting. They were just. It was like a lawyer riding in his lawyer work clothes, riding a bike. I remember they would stop by the bike shop, interested in maybe like, booties or something. I'm like, man, you can't put booties over work shoes. There's no such thing. It's just commuter wear, like, bicycle riding gear for someone like that didn't exist at the time.
Right.
And I would put a plastic bag over
hefty bag poncho. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would just like wrap them in plastic, like, here, give me your feet and here's some duct tape and I'll duct tape your feet and, at least keep you dry.
At least get fenders if you're going to wear that suit.
Yeah.
Or, lawyer up.
Yeah. And then my friend Chris Stoddard opened a place called Rapid Transit. Mm-hmm. That was the first kind of Chicago commuter shop. He worked with me at Turin, and he went off and opened his shop in the early 90s in Wicker Park when it was still pretty, pretty dark in Wicker Park. It was just it was cool. It was, it was a cool place. But it could be a little bit rough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just to think about where we've come from there and where we're at now, it's like, it's pretty amazing, I mean, it's taken 30 years.
It's definitely taken a while.
So it's taken a while. So it feels like yesterday, but it's been 30 years to get to the point where we're at right now,
It is pretty wild too, because like in Chicago City Council, the kind of bicycle and pedestrian advocates have a lot of clout,
Mm-hmm.
And
Jeff Greenfield, man, that dude was just a bike John Greenfield. That dude was like a bike messenger punk.
Like bike messenger
he was just some
in the 90s.
Yeah, he was just some punk that used to come through the bike shop. We weren't great friends, but he ran through those bike shops. I knew who, and now I see him. He's like, he wears a suit and tie or at least a jacket and tie.
By the way, how is he doing? Because I've been kind of following online, but you actually sometimes write bylines for the Streets Blog Chicago newsletter. It's cool to see your byline there, by the way. Like, I remember one day opening and I saw AJ LaTrace and I was just scrolling. I'm like, wait a minute. I had to go back. I'm like, did I just see AJ's name? I'm like,
I know that guy.
And sure enough, AJ's filling in. How is he doing after his after getting hit there downstate?
He seems to be.
Did you hear about all that, Joe?
Yeah. He was bike touring, right? And like a culvert. Off and like whacked him, right?
Jeez.
Yeah. So
scary.
The story was that he was in downstate Illinois near, I guess. They pronounce it Cairo, Illinois, but it'd be spelled Cairo, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
But he was just riding along, and a truck, like a pickup truck with an unsecured load, and they had some pipes sticking off the side of it, and I believe it just drove up and hit him in the back of the head, and he went tumbling, and of course,
Jesus Christ.
Getting injured in the back of your head is like that will kill you. It's like brainstem injuries and stuff. But yeah, he was out of commission for a couple weeks, but he seems to be doing fine now. And there was like definitely kind of like a scramble to try and get the site, keep the site going because he was in a hospital. And so him and Stephen Vance reached out and they're like, hey, can you like just kind of help us run the site for a week or two? And
so did they know you? Like, do you obviously know them? Okay, I wasn't sure because I didn't know your connection.
I've known Stephen Vance now for maybe 11 or 12 years.
Oh, very cool.
And I remember, like, I think I actually met him for the first time at one of the community meetings for the Bloomingdale Trail. And it's just so funny. Speaking of how much things have changed in Chicago, I remember going to one of the public meetings for the Bloomingdale Trail. And it was just all like Bucktown yuppies being like, I don't want this. People are going to look into our condo. And there was like
put your clothes on.
There was no like bike scene people there. There was no like cool bike people there. It was just your typical sort of NIMBY community group stuff. But
very NIMBY.
Yeah, but
we're all for it unless it's around our house.
But yeah, so I've written for Streets Blog as a contributor for a while, and
oh, that's right, you did the closing a cycle smithy for them, right?
Yeah,
that I remember. Okay,
and then I attended a community meeting a week or two ago for the Levitt Greenway. They're doing this kind of overhaul of Levitt Street between, what is it like? The Damon Diversey intersection right there.
Yep.
Basically from there, kind of like where Lathrop Homes is,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to what's the cemetery up there?
One by
the really big. I know the name. I'm just forgetting it right now.
is it
But
near, along Western?
yeah, like the really big.
I know the one you mean.
So, but
by Raven, between Ravenswood and like
yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically going to be this. I think it's like a 3-mile stretch of Levitt that they're now turning into this like kind of bicycle highway.
Oh, about time.
That's
And,
amazing.
You know, speaking of cargo bikes and families, it's
Mhm.
like very much. They said part of the reason for doing this is that there's been so many families and kids moving in over there, and there's like I think 4 public schools. I have to double check, but you know, there's a number of schools along that route, and
God, that would be so amazing.
so it's pretty wild to see, you know. And then we actually just got bike lanes on Belmont Avenue over here.
Yep,
just
I
like in the
saw 'em.
last week or two.
Diversey just got ones not super long ago. I mean, they haven't had those very long. I remember just pulling out one day in the car, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like, and they're like fresh paint, like, you know, you definitely feel a little bit safer because I normally avoid Diversey, but
oh god,
now it's like a little better. Like,
there's some streets that are just obviously not like Western is one,
like Ashland. Oh my god, Ashland is
I
just
think
like
Fullerton.
you could barely fit 2 cars, let alone anything else. I see people biking there, and I just want to tell them like, please take a side street, like anyway.
So it's, you know, slowly but surely, and you know, this kind of area over here, it's so funny, like Avondale versus Logan Square. Logan Square, you've got the big boulevards, and it's very preserved. You know, the kind of the old housing stock and the greystones, and then this area is just like a lot of like strip malls and big box retail, and then of course the expressway. So people drive very, very fast. So I mean, obviously having the bike lanes, it's not going to totally, I think in a driver's mind, completely separate, but it'll, I think, help say like, well,
Brings a little awareness.
right. If you're on a bike, you know, they're not going to have this, oh, well, you don't belong here, you shouldn't be here. It's like, well, no, I mean,
right
now
it's hard to argue against like the law, and like, I mean, I know some people still do, but to see like a dedicated painted, it's something, like you said, it's pushing against the darkness a little bit.
Wow. Oh, that's great, man. That's great.
Yeah, but it's great you're like tied into those folks, and it's great to see your byline there, and I get Streets blog. It's my must read. I have like a handful of must reads, and I at least read all through the headlines and then the matter that comes after it. And by the way, I'll just give a shout out. There's a GoFundMe, right, for John. If people want to help him and his recovery and all that.
Yeah, well, they're also trying to, you know, obviously they're always trying to raise money for Streets blog since it's a nonprofit as well, and you know I'm sure there was some higher freelancing costs with trying to get everyone to help out, and I'd like to. I pitched doing a piece like on the Belmont resurfacing and bike lanes, but you know, maybe if he's listening, if we can get Alderman Rosa to get back to me, that would be great.
Yeah.
So.
There you go.
A little trouble getting through to the alderman, is that right?
Yeah, well, he's kind of been elevated in city council now too, so he's busy. He's now like the zoning chair. So
oh wow, well that's powerful.
Now with the new mayor, so he's busy. I'm sure.
Yeah,
you know, there's probably other folks.
Well, hopefully with Mayor Johnson, we have like, you know, some like new momentum, and just like I feel like he's probably hopefully going to be a good advocate for like for programs like that. Like I don't know
if you guys just saw, but just in this last week, they have passed the pilot program for the city shoveling the sidewalks.
I did not
in certain areas.
Yeah,
which is kind of amazing when you think about it.
It's huge.
Like, you know, Chicago is a thing where it's like the onus is on individual property owners to shovel their sidewalks.
Yeah,
and now the city will actually do it.
That's pretty amazing.
We'll see if the city actually does it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense against the city of Chicago, but
doesn't always work.
It used to be the city that works, but that was during the old machine patronage system.
Daily.
You know? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is a lot of people don't shovel. I know a lot of good souls do, but even just in our neighborhood, if it's any kind of sample, you'll see like 2 or 3 perfectly shoveled, like, you know, properties, and then you get like a stretch that isn't. It's just like 2 inches of ice, and you're like, you see these like elderly people out there and stuff. You're like, oh my god.
Yeah, you need studded shoes, or you know,
Some Schwabel studs.
Yeah. Well, you guys were, well, besides the Chicago stuff, so you two were busy a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago. It was 3 weeks ago now.
It's a little bit ago. It's been
Yeah.
a while, yeah. About a month ago, 3 months, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
6 months, a year.
Yeah. You attended the Waterford closing. Was it the closing
It was
ride?
the
Is that
final
what they call
ride.
it? Final,
Basically, yeah.
they call it the final ride. So
The farewell ride.
Yeah.
Waterford Bicycle Company up in Waterford, Wisconsin, formerly owned by Richard Schwinn of the Schwinn dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
The last remaining, I guess, tied to the Schwinn, bike family in the bike business, right?
As it was, yeah, sure.
All kudos to AJ. He proposed the idea, and I was like, I'm on board. Let's do this.
Yeah, it looked like a cool event. It was kind of a historic thing.
Yeah,
to see
do you
those
wanna
guys go away?
Kind of describe it, or
You go ahead, man. It was your baby. You
Okay.
wanted to do it, and I loved it.
well, I had no idea. I just one day, honestly, I can't even remember what it was. I think I was just Google searching Waterford or
Mhm.
something. I don't know. And then I saw on their website that they were closing permanently, and I
Mhm.
was like, "What?" Yeah, again, it was just completely caught me off by surprise. I had no idea. I don't think they really publicized it. Initially, it seemed like it was kind of like a pretty under the radar type of deal. Anyways,
Yeah, at first it did come through on some of the bike retailer
some of the
news.
industry stuff.
Yeah, some of the industry news, and it seemed like he initially was trying to put a deal together with the people that worked there and
Yeah.
see if he could sell the business. There was something going on, but it wasn't the first announcement didn't sound like they were closing for sure. But then maybe a week or two later,
Then it was just like
it was definite. Yeah, and it was like, oh, that's it.
But yeah, so they were shutting down for good, and they had planned a farewell ride for enthusiasts, anyone who was a friend or fan of the brand,
Mhm.
and also kind of in lead up to this big auction where they were auctioning off everything basically in the factory. And so yeah, I just thought because I'd never gone. I think I can't remember. Didn't you go years ago?
Yeah, I've been up there
With
a couple
John and
couple-
Eric Blankenship and all of
Yeah.
them. Okay.
Yeah.
And but I had never gone, and it's not that far from where Danny and I live. Danny and I are basically in the same neighborhood, but same area. So yeah, I thought let's go because I also just sort of felt like, honestly, I haven't really been doing very much this year. I've just been kind of like hanging out at home, being a dad, trying to whatever.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I just haven't been doing much, and so I thought like this will be not only like a great little day trip, but also I just knew that I would regret it, if I didn't go. It's not like if you miss a music festival, you're like, oh well, whatever, I'll see it next time, or this band will come through again. It's not the end of the world, but knowing that this was like the very last chance, it was sort of like we got to go.
And you have ties to Waterford in weird ways, and that.
Yeah, I guess we all kind of do, but and I had always been a fan. And the other kind of thing that was interesting or sort of crazy timing about it was like I can't remember. I think it was over the winter. I was texting with you guys and like, hey, should I buy a custom Waterford?
Yeah.
And that's when you started talking about, well, we could just go to Spain and learn how to build one.
Yeah,
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of interesting because like I was even thinking about buying one, and if I had done it at the time, that would have been probably one of the last frames. But anyways, yeah, and then we sold them at Cycle Smithy, and I believe the one that I think we talked about my Robin Williams story right before on a previous episode.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and
Just quick
folks
refresher
because it's so good.
There's just as like a quick footnote for anyone listening. If you go back to episode, I can't remember, but
something.
Yeah.
something. You can find a longer,
Somewhere between 1 and 50.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah.
Longer version. But
Yeah,
long
work
story
your way
short,
through those.
Cycle Smithy, we were a very kind of we had it all. We had cheap $300 bikes. We had $6,000, $10,000 bikes. We kind of had everything. but we were also, it was a very kind of skeleton crew type staff for the most part. It'd be like maybe one person downstairs, maybe two, and then one person upstairs.
Yep.
And so, I was kind of manning the sales floor, and lo and behold, this gentleman walks in wearing a black kind of designer graphic T-shirt, and he just looked very LA. You know how people you're just like, that person's from LA or lives in LA. And it was kind of this almost like Damien Hirst, like, the skull diamond thing that he did. It looked like that, but it was also very incognito. This guy had a hat and sunglasses on, and he just walked in, and
was he by himself?
He was just by himself, and just kind of walked in, and I was always I wouldn't ignore people. I would say, hey, but I was never like, I would never get right into people's faces, but I'd say, hey, like, let me know if you need help with anything, if you'd like to see anything, happy to throw something on a trainer.
That's the perfect approach, because I hate when people come up to you and like, they're just trying to sell you.
Yeah, they're just like right in your face.
You need some breathing room.
Yeah.
So good on you for that.
And so I'm kind of like behind the case there and just like, hey, let me know if he's like, okay, sure. And then he just walks right up to this red Waterford we had hanging from the rafters. And so at Cyclesmith, we had these kind of exposed ceiling trusses, and we'd hung bikes from them, which is actually really cool.
Totally cool.
I think that's like a really great way to actually sell high-end bikes, display and sell high-end bikes. And so, but he just walked right up to this really fancy bike. I believe, I guess you built it, right, Joe? Or you ordered it, or?
Yeah, it was the kind of store where we'd order cool stuff, and then the boss would just allow us to walk through the store and build it, or order cool parts and like build dream bikes. We would get to build dream bikes,
which is like kind of funny, because I think last time when we were talking about this, you were like, probably not the smartest business move.
Horrible business
business move.
Yeah.
But it was cool. It was like, actually, like, that was like such a privilege to have there.
It's kind of punk rock. It's Well, Mark's just like, fuck it, build that like $10,000 bike, put all the crazy shit on it.
Put it all on, and he didn't mind. Like he encouraged it, which was that was the amazing part of working for him. And I think in the podcast that we did with him on the closing the shop, he admitted to he
pretty much did.
He admitted to all of that. He's like, they're
kind of like unsellable bikes almost. Like, eventually, someone would come in, it was like the perfect size. Yes, I'll take. I mean, it was like getting a car and getting every possible option.
Yeah,
we would be hanging there shining. You're like,
in the winter we'd dump it.
So I was going to say, so if it didn't sell in the winter, I'd be listing it on eBay.
Yeah. We just try to recoup our whatever we had into it.
But this guy walks right up. He goes up to this bike. It's hanging there. It's the closest bike to the staircase, walking into the store upstairs, and he's just kind of looking at it, and I didn't want to, again, I'm not like, hey, cool, it's a cool bike, you want to check it out?
Like the old car salesman thing, like, oh, you know how to pick them, right?
Yeah, I totally. But yeah, he just goes, hey, can I see this bike? I'm like, sure, and I pull it down, and he's like, what size is it? And it was like a 54. It was kind of
it was my size.
Like,
oh,
like
gee,
standard.
coincidence.
Yeah.
Oh,
gee, funny how that works.
I ordered everything nice.
It's all 54s.
And he's like, yeah, can I ride it? And I'm like, well, we don't do test rides because we.
Oh, you didn't? Because we did test rides when we worked there.
Something like that though. That was a $6,000 bike.
That was a $6,000 bike,
okay,
but also just we never really did them just because of the location, and it's kind of a liability issue. And,
totally.
And quick little footnote: this is always the funniest thing I remember about. Actually, did we do test? Maybe we did do test rides.
Yeah, we did.
Maybe like cheaper bikes, like hybrids.
That's right. We did do them because we had some store helmets.
Yeah.
And it was funny because Nick Stevens, they were loaner helmets, but instead of spelling LOAN, he put LONER, loaner. So in permanent market, these helmets had loaner written all over them.
That's awesome.
It was like so funny. But anyways, I'm like, no, I bet I can set this up for you in the trainer, and then that's when I'm like, hi, blah blah blah. What's your name? And he didn't just say like Robin. He was like Robin Williams.
Oh my God!
I'm just like, hey,
James
what's
Bond.
your name? He's like Robin Williams, and I was like, oh, okay. I'm like the Robin Williams. And he's like, yes.
Did he still have his glasses on at that point?
Yeah, he was still totally
still
full
incognito.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think last time I don't think I actually said this, but I was like in my mind, I'm like, oh, Robin Williams, like the genie from Aladdin, you know? Like,
yeah, that's what you said. Yeah.
because for my generation,
Of all his movies, you're like,
yeah, I'm like, I'm a few years younger than you guys, but that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like peak.
right.
What do you call it? That was like the golden era of Disney, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But anyways,
It's amazing.
And so something really unique about that bike was it had first gen SRAM red. It was the
Ooh,
first
that's right.
SRAM red Grupo, so it was super light. Carbon fork. It was, these days it's pretty common to see these high-end steel bikes with a carbon fork and really lightweight parts. But back then, that was like it was like a 16.
I was gonna say, I think it was like a 16 or 17 pound.
It was
bike.
a super lightweight steel bike. That was like the goal was to build.
very light, especially for steel. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the lightest steel bike that we could build, and it was with the new SRAM Red because that was their whole thing was weight.
right.
When they first came out, it was like, oh, the lightest weight road Grupo ever.
But it was also just really badass because SRAM really kind of like they upped the game for everybody.
That was
when
it.
that came
Yeah.
out, and also like Force and even like their double tap system and everything. But anyways, kind of wrapping up the story, it was probably one of the easiest sales because we set him up on the trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I just spoke to him for a little bit. I didn't like fanboy or freak out or anything. I was just talking to him like a normal person. I asked him, I did ask him like, why was he in town? He was doing a tour.
Yeah. He was practicing or doing like a dry run of a one-man show that he was doing.
Stand-up comedy.
And so, and people forget that, when these celebrities are traveling around the world and doing tours, like they've got plenty of downtime.
Yeah.
Like they'll go and explore and hang out, get food. And so it's cool that he knew to come to Cycle Smithy.
Yeah.
He bought the bike. It was all within like 15 minutes. And I remember
Amazing.
Mia Moore was the mechanic for the day. And I ran downstairs and I was like, Mia, Robin Williams just bought this bike. And then like you could see her, like I'm talking to him or I'm filling out the ticket and stuff. And you can see her kind of like peep a little bit, like her glasses kind of like up from downstairs.
Yeah,
She's like looking. And but then the other kind of funny thing, and I don't know if I mentioned this during the last one, but so Cycle Smithy, we were so old school and inefficient that we wrote all of our sales tickets by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And we just put them in a box, and then they'd go in the rafters in the basement once the box filled up. And Robin Williams wanted to buy one of Mark's old bikes hanging from the rafters, and at the time Mark was like, nope. And Mark didn't he didn't care. I'm like, well, this is like a famous actor, like this could be a really cool thing for us. And he's like, no.
Mark is the least starstruck person in the world. He
He's
doesn't
the
give
most
a
nonplussed.
shit.
Yeah.
He's like the
Lady
most like,
Gaga could jump on his face and he'd be like, whatever.
Yeah.
he's like the most like nonplussed person in the world. But anyways, that's that winter, of course. And then Mark's like, sell everything.
Yeah.
Like Mark would probably, sell his kidneys or something. But and then he asked me to find the ticket, and I'm obviously digging through boxes and boxes and boxes. And I think Joe told me during the dinner, I remember mentioning this. I'm like, I could never find that damn ticket. And then Joe's like, well, I took it.
I took it. I had it. I saved it as a souvenir. I'm like, this fucking Robin
got it?
Williams. Yeah. I
You
got
got to
it.
show it to us.
That's good. You should frame it. Or
You should
something.
post it on the gram.
I will. You know what? I got to go dig it out. I have it somewhere. I have it saved.
Please do
but
that.
I know that I do. I moved 5 years ago, but I put it somewhere safe.
Somewhere.
But it's in a box.
And if you want a pic to go with it in the gram, you could do like the little slide, a bunch of photos. I have a nice pic that I love of the Robin Williams mural in Logan Square.
Oh, nice.
And I can, send it to you.
Oh,
You can
okay.
put together a little
Well,
AJ story. And
yeah. Well, actually,
receipt.
I have some new news related to the Robin Williams Waterford.
Oh,
I
sorry about that.
that night, I can't remember. So the night, and we can talk more about the trip to Waterford too, but the night before we went, sometimes I get into these like rabbit holes
Mhm.
at night where I'm just like on the computer, just chasing the rabbit hole. And then the next thing you know, it'll be like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Anyways, I found the guy who bought the bike.
Oh, wow.
And I messaged him on Instagram, and we've actually been in touch. And so, yeah, I told him like, hey, I'd love to have a call with you.
Yeah.
I thought maybe, it could actually maybe even be interesting to have some audio even for the show
Absolutely,
if he was willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just told him, I was like, hey, I sold the bike and we'd love to talk to you or get your story. And he was like, well, it's not really that interesting. I just bought it, at the auction from his family. But it's in good hands. The guy who bought it like rides it and uses it.
Do you know what he paid for it? I'm just curious.
I can't remember, but the interesting thing is the reason why they did, and I didn't realize this until I started kind of going down this rabbit hole recently, but apparently his bike collection became a point of contention among his family,
Really?
Robin Williams' family. Because, unfortunately...
After he passed?
Right.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Unfortunately, and this is just how it goes, is that
Yes.
when people pass, like all the... the
estate, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look what happened with Martin Luther King. I mean, that story's crazy. I mean, there's all kinds of infighting with that.
Right. Or, yeah. And
I
so.
know it's like a totally different example.
No, but
like,
it's a very
it's the
common.
first thing that jumped to mind.
Right. But it's a very common story. And so I think what ended up happening, I'm not sure if a judge ordered it or how it came to the determination, but the family just said, you know what, instead of fighting, we'll just auction it all and it's going to go to Robin's favorite charities.
Awesome.
There was like 2 or 3 charities that he was very
taking the high
fond
road.
of.
Yep.
Yeah. So they ended up and he had 100 bikes that they ended up auctioning, and he had all kinds of, basically like it was a very, it was like an enthusiast collection,
Yeah.
And
He's like Jay Leno, but like bikes.
but for bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them, I saw photos of them. Some of them were obviously way too big for him. The seats slammed and like a 56 frame. So like some of the stuff obviously didn't fit him. You know? But yeah, I saw various pictures of him with different bikes. He had all sorts of just goofy things.
I love that he loved bikes. That's amazing. Obviously, he was a big Lance fan. That's fine. But he was a big Tour de France fan, and he was like.
He was one of the first celebrities that you saw kind of embracing cycling. You didn't see like a lot of, like as far as like Americans at the Tour de France, like he was one of the, he was probably the first or like,
Definitely one of the early ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always really appreciated the fact that like, not to get all like existential or
oh, please do.
Deep or whatever, dark, but it's like, like even like speaking from personal experience, it's like cycling and mental health, like it's a very positive thing for mental health. And for someone like Robin Williams, who obviously struggled, but was also a big time cyclist and like knew the power of it and appreciated it. I think that was always a really important thing to me.
Yeah, it's nice to think that it brought him some peace, a little bit, just that the 2-hour ride or whatever he was able to do on those things that, that maybe it just quieted his mind, gave him a little bit of a break because there was obviously something going on up there that ultimately took him down, but
totally,
the bike seemed to help him a lot, and and he did a lot for cycling. I think at that time, he really kind of championed the sport. We didn't have any other celebrity, bike enthusiasts at that time, and that was a real,
except George Bush.
He was.
John Kerry.
Right. Yeah, he was riding a bike a little bit at that time, but he brought a lot of attention to the sport.
I think it also like humanized him too, in a sense. Not that he needed that, but like made him feel human is a better way to say it, maybe. Like, because like we all rode bikes as kids. Like it's just like a very natural thing to do for most people. So for him to like, you think of celebrities, and I think of all celebrities. I've only met a couple here and there, maybe, but. He always seemed like the most approachable one. Obviously you met him, so, but like just the fact that he would go out and ride a bike, like going out and riding a bike is like the most basic human thing in a way. It's like you got to pedal, you got to suffer a little bit, you got to work a little bit, but everyone can kind of appreciate the effort. And then just like there's all that nostalgia from like childhood, just like going out and there's that F word, the freedom word, right?
Yeah,
like,
there's very little glamour in it. So it's, like riding a bike is not a very glamorous activity when you...
Well, in a sense, not, yeah.
Well, the suffering is like kind of where the reward comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like, just again, a quick little footnote, but I had a buddy who, he had his own kind of stuff going on, but after he left the military, he ended up getting some kind of military disability. But anyways, he ended up going on all these. He hiked every big trail basically in the country. He did Appalachian Trail, Pacific Coast Trail,
Nice.
and basically was just like wouldn't recommend anyone doing the full Appalachian Trail because it's a lot of suffering.
It's a lot.
It's like he was glad he did it, and of course, like there's like beautiful moments in it, but yeah, there's a lot of times where it's kind of like, man, why am I doing this?
Oh, it's super
This is rough.
grilling, ultra stuff. Yeah.
But
sorry. So
yeah.
did we finish the Robin Williams transaction part? Like, so how did the sale kind of end? Or I didn't want to.
Yeah, no, he
forward, but
well, so the other thing too is that we had a cool website and Tumblr at the time.
Yeah.
Thanks to Joe.
Oh man.
And
Tumblr.
And so I just thought it'd be so cool. I'm like, we'd be the coolest place in the country if we can get a photo of Robin Williams in his brand new Waterford.
God.
And I asked him if he would be willing to do a photo, and he's like, no, I don't do that. But no, he just, it was just very transactional.
Yeah.
He left and went and grabbed coffee while Mia was kind of double checking the
bike,
kind of doing a one over. And
did he just walk out with the bike?
Yep, and he walked out with
Just
the
like
bike.
that.
With that, yeah. And I think bikes like that, we would just throw some kind of basic flats on or whatever, for someone to ride home.
Flat pedals, yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. And that was in 2000. Had to have been in 2008 or 9. And then he passed away in 2014.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he didn't have it for very long.
Right.
And but going back to Waterford, so I had also, instead of buying a custom expensive bike, I ended up finding one on Facebook, as we've been discussing. And so then I ended up purchasing one fairly, I guess over the winter at some point. And that was a pretty funny story in itself.
And it happens to be sitting to my right behind Danny, who's staring back at it, and
the quick
just try not to drool on your microphone.
you know what? It's a beautiful bike. It's so clean.
Great looking bike.
It's a great looking bike.
The tape is perfect for it too.
Yeah,
it just goes so well.
Did you retape it or
nope? It's basically this is exactly how it was. Yeah. So the kind of quick story on it is it's a 93, which is the first year that they went under the brand Waterford. That was basically after Schwinn went kaput and was purchased by that big conglomerate. I guess it was Pacific, right? I can't remember, but Schwinn, the brand and the IP was sold off, and then Richard Schwinn and his partner Mark Muller decided to keep the factory and then go by the brand name Waterford. So that is a Paramount. It's the same thing as a Schwinn Paramount.
Yep.
True Temper OS. I think it was like one of the first years that they introduced the OS tubing.
And that bike doesn't look like it's been ridden.
It's in really good shape.
Amazing.
It's mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's mostly black frame. It has a gray fork and head tube.
It's a gray frame. And the other thing that's interesting is because it's the first year they did Waterford, I'm pretty sure. And if you get close to it, if you take a look at it later, you can see like where the lugs are. There's like this kind of brass.
Yep. I can see it from here.
And so it was like sort of.
It's a nice touch.
I think that they did this so they could show the craftsmanship of the welding.
That was very smart.
Yeah.
I have an old Paramount at the shop, and that was common on the nicer Paramount frames. They kind of highlight, with paint around the lugs.
Yeah, it's like ornamental almost. Like you see like in a beautiful ceiling or something in Europe, like a castle.
Yeah, which requires a lot of work. I mean, that's all handwork, right?
Yep.
That's somebody with a brush going through and doing that, after they've painted it and then clear coating over that. I mean, it's a real process to get it to where it's at. Yeah.
On the down tube, it has Waterford decals and they're like nice yellow.
And it's an older logo.
It's an older logo.
It's an older logo.
One,
it changed over the years. So I mean, that's their first logo, and the font's a little different from anything that they're using.
It's a great looking bike.
And so I brought it with us when we went up to Waterford, and
is that what you rode?
That's what I rode.
Okay.
And Danny was warning me, hey, just ride what you're used to, something that's dialed in, and I'm like, well, I mean, I've not really ridden it very much, but I'm going to bring it because, again, I just felt like we're doing it. I should bring it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were kind of like, I've got this bike and like I might just kind of put it together, right before. And my only point was just like,
Well, I only brought that up is that it was good advice because
okay,
when we actually got there, and we started the ride, the seat post was slipping.
Oh,
And so then I stopped. I asked, "Hey, can we stop real quick?" And I didn't really think it was going to be a big deal because this was supposed to be a sort of
yeah. Well, that gets into
casual ride.
another story we can talk about, but I'll let you finish this point. Sorry.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I probably should have really dialed it in more before we left.
I mean,
And,
sorry if you all know this, but it goes back to the adage, which you hear in bike racing a lot, but probably maybe other sports too. But like, never race anything new.
mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of obvious, right? It's like, because it could just go wrong. Don't race in new shoes, not even new gloves, like whatever. Like, race on what you know really well. So that was the only part of it. So when you're like, oh, I might just ride my regular bike, or I have this other one, and I was just like, oh well, you could roll the dice, but maybe you just want to do the one you're
just that short time of stopping to raise the saddle just a tiny bit was enough for me to get dropped, basically. So,
well, yeah. So is this a good point to segue into? Okay, so
yeah,
my little snippet here, my contribution. So anyway, it was so cool. AJ brought this up. I'm so glad we did it. It was just fun to get in a car and road trip with our bikes, and that was super fun. And it was a beautiful day. It was pretty warm, pretty sunny. And it was we get there. We're kind of like we got there like mid. I felt like the tour was like the little factory tour, and it's a decent size like independent bike, factory. I haven't been in many, but it's not like huge. It's kind of perfect size, I guess. Anyway, so we kind of got there as it was like halfway through or winding down, and your man, Mr. Schwinn, what's his full name? Richard. Okay, it's actually Richard Schwinn. So anyway, he was holding forth, and there was a crowd of maybe 25, 35 people. But yeah, we were kind of going through and just gawking at all the beautiful frames. Like there were a lot of bikes that still hadn't been finished. Like they were in like various stages of like being, produced. So it was just super cool. We were just freely, able to walk around, and I was snapping pics and posting some stuff on the Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was very cool. And there's obviously a lot of great like signage and like just like old school stuff like that. But yeah, so we kind of do that, and then everyone got together kind of out front. And there were a lot of people. I thought it was really cool how many people turned out.
and a lot of bikes.
A lot of bikes, a lot of really sexy, beautiful bikes. Really, really nice, like Waterfords. Like people who had, obviously, so people don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Waterfords were always custom. And then their other brand, Gunner was like off the shelf.
Off the shelf, yeah.
But super nice, custom steel frames. And anyway, so we're out there, and once we assembled everyone, you really got the sense. I'm like, how many people would you say were there? 100, 150?
I mean, I think he counted at some point, but yeah, I mean, it had to have been over 100.
It had to be at least 100 people.
It's a good turnout.
It's a good turnout, and and it's like I said, the venue's perfect, size for like a factory like that. But like with all those people, it felt kind of like a lot in a really good way. So we did a big photo out front. By the way, I just thought of that for the first time. Have you seen any of those photos? I want to get one of those photos because
actually,
we were in there.
I don't know if I texted you guys, but on the actual Waterford website right now, if anyone goes to it, they have the photo of the big group.
Oh, cool!
It's going to live on the site basically indefinitely.
Well,
so you and I,
our beautiful visage is there for all to see. But no, it was a really fun photo. And that was great. So then we broke up into 3 different rides. I did like A, B, C kind of ride. So, like slightly faster. Or no, actually it wasn't speed based. It was longer. So it was a 62, like 100K. Then there was like a middle ride 45, which is the one we were going to do. And then there was a shorter one, which was like 27, maybe something like that.
Yeah, 26 or 7.
So anyway, but to make a long story short, AJ and I are like, we're going to jump in the 45. And my whole expectation, I was wearing these same shorts. These are just like cutoffs. And I just had like a little, short sleeve shirt on. And I had SPD like cleats on my shoes, but I had these like commuter shoes. The idea being like, I just was expecting a totally social, lollygagging, stop for some photos.
Fun ride.
Yeah, fun ride. Stop for an iced tea. Social.
Yeah.
Well, there were a handful of people in our ride who were just like pacelining, double-breasted pacelining,
Gee.
doing 20, 22, 23, like from the gun. And I'm just
Wow.
like, whoa, 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 whoa. And like, I was ready for like a really, like, I wanted to hang with you.
Yeah, same deal. I was just wearing
Just
some regular
BS.
shorts
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and then
t-shirt.
and you know, some people on the ride were a little bit like us, but then there were like the middling guys, they were kind of like that. But then there were like the guys up front, they're like on their aero bikes.
Oh, it's that Wisconsin hammerhead.
It totally
scene,
is.
man. Those dudes from Milwaukee and Oshkosh
And there's amazing riders up there. All
There's
respect,
a ton.
obviously.
Yeah, there's
Trek
a ton
is
of-
in nearby
Mhm.
Waterloo and all that. We know all that, but
That-
like they should have been. I'm not taking aims at them, but like they should have been on a longer ride. Like if
Yeah,
they want to
yeah.
do that, just go on a longer ride. Anyway, so we roll out and AJ's like, I gotta stop. I'm like, yeah, let's just stop. This is kind of before things picked up a little bit, I guess.
Mhm.
Like literally one or
It was very early
1 or 2
on, so
miles
I figured,
out.
I figured, well, I may as well do it now.
Right.
You know.
So I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's just stop. They're just cruising along, and we adjust his binder bolt, and we get back on, and next thing I know, they're like a good distance. I'm like, all right, come on, AJ, let's just pick up the pace just a little bit. We'll catch back on. We get there, and like various things happen, and next thing you know, I'm in this like whittled down group, and then I had to make the call, and I'm like, do I go back? What do I do? We end up doing like 45 miles, like pretty fast. Like, it was a pretty fast ride. It was a nice ride. It was a great ride unto itself, but it was also not what I expected.
So did you guys? I missed it. So did you guys ride together the 45 or
No, so he
So-
ended up getting he had to adjust his seat bolt again, right?
Mhm,
Correct me if
yeah.
I'm wrong. And then the shorter ride, 27-mile group, they pulled up and he just jumped in with them.
Okay.
Yeah. So, because at first I was like, damn, like, that's it. Like, I just got dropped. There's no way I'm riding this 45-mile ride by myself
Yeah,
in like
yeah.
Wisconsin.
You made the right call, and I had
So-
I had to put in a very good effort to get back into that group, which struck me halfway through it. I'm like, this is like doing an interval. I'm doing like 300 watts to catch back
Yeah,
up to
In
these
your
guys.
jorts.
In my jorts. And I'm just like, and I was literally just like confounded. I'm like, I was very confused, and it all happened very quickly. And I'm like, I thought this was a social ride. Like every social ride I've been on is just like,
Well, fortunately,
16 miles an hour, stop for iced tea.
I was gonna say, well, fortunately, like when I did hang back and wait, I was actually just about to turn. I'm like, well, fuck it. I guess I'll go back and have a hot dog because Richard before the ride
brats,
started,
yeah,
he was like, oh, we're gonna have brats and food when
Right.
you come back,
Uh-huh.
which we got eventually, but
And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go back and hang out and get a brat. And I pulled over and I'm looking at my phone to like check to see how far the factory was, and it was still very early on.
yeah.
But then, the next thing I know, the next ride came up, and I'm like, oh, I'll just hang out with them. And then I had to adjust the saddle again. I was a little bit. The problem I was having was that, well, maybe the seat post may be
Wrong size.
wrong
maybe.
size.
Mhm.
It could be an issue. But
Oh,
the other thing was, I was like really reluctant to just crank down on
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
On that old
volume.
Trek 720 I got
I
for
think
30
I'd mentioned
bucks.
this too because I have busted so many binder bolts on the
Yeah,
road.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was getting a little
Ugh.
bit freaked out. Was that I think you'd mentioned that, but
Things were a little brittle.
I eventually
Yeah.
carried a couple in my bag because I popped them more than I'd
Yeah,
like
the
to
camping
admit.
ones were pretty, but they were brittle. So if it has
So
that-
yeah, my old hybrid bikes I bought for 30 bucks. No, I don't care. I'll just crank it
Right.
down.
yeah.
But obviously, the binder it's integrated into the
Yep.
the lug, and so if you snap it off, you could fix it, but it would
Not really
suck.
on the road. Yeah,
it would suck, and so I didn't want to like snap it off, and so. But anyways, the second time I was like, all right, I'm gonna like raise it high, so if it does start slipping again,
Yeah.
and
Well, that was smart. That was smart.
but I'm glad I did because like it was like killing my knees trying to like just kind of. We've seen those. You see the guys and they're like kind of way too low. And
Yeah,
you're like, oof.
Sean
Oh,
Kelly.
yeah.
You're just like, oof, man. That's not good for your knees.
It's
and
not good
legs.
for a lot of things, but you do see
Yeah.
that. But anyway, so it was amazing. The routes were beautiful. Very very little car traffic. Beautiful rolling kind of roads. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Gorgeous day. My only thing was like they needed to have like really clear communication, like a ride leader, and say,
yeah.
hey guys, because most rides do that. They'll be like, hey, this is a chill, no drop ride,
Yep.
16 to 17 miles an hour. We're gonna make 2 stops. If you have any issues, holler at us. If you want to be like racer guy, go in the longer ride, and you can like you guys can go nuts and attack each other for KOMs and PRs. But like, anyway, so that was the only little complaint, but otherwise it was really nice. And I think you ended up having a pretty good ride too.
Yeah, I did. And the ride that I ended up hanging on was way more chill.
Yeah, it was more of the relaxed ride.
Yeah, and it was a hot day too. So as the other,
it was a very hot day.
It was a really hot day.
It was a really hot day, and
wrenching.
and I brought 2 water bottles, and I drink a lot of water normally, but I
remember I was like, make sure you got a couple bottles on
but
there.
I went through all my water very early on, definitely in the first 10 miles of the ride.
Wow.
It was the real feel was easily 90.
I think it was more than that. I think it was like 95.
I was gonna, at least. So and there was like high humidity, and it was just blazing
high humidity.
Sun. Yeah.
And surprisingly, there was quite a bit of rolling hills too.
There was there were drags and little rollers, a little lumpy. Yeah. I mean,
it's not just
overall super great. It was just a little weird, like being in that ride, because I was like, we averaged like 18.5. I'm like, that's kind of fast for And I remember one guy coming up to me. He's an older gent. I had found out he actually just literally that day came in, and that night he drove in from Georgia. He just rode his bike across Georgia by himself. Mm-hmm. He was 77.
Wow.
And he had this old Waterford, and it was banged up. He didn't give a shit. He had like that electrical tape around some of his bar tape. Like he was just motoring. He's like, I'm all about the ride. Like, and he came up to me. He's like, oh, I didn't realize this ride would be so fast. And I was like, because I think he saw my get up. Like, I guess you didn't either.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, me neither. But it was very warm. Anyway, great time. We all ended up back at HQ, and there were brats. And we're just like guzzling water, having a couple brats. And
you met a couple interesting people though in your group, right?
I did. There was a guy Joe knows.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you saw the photos I posted that day, but I think his name is Ray. Works for Cigna.
Oh yeah.
Pepsi Cola.
Yeah.
Bike.
Yeah.
So he had the same Paramount that I have.
Okay.
And it was this because I just saw it, and he had this matching Pepsi kit, which goes with the bike perfectly. Like he was just decked out. Like he was the sharpest looking guy.
Really.
Of the whole day, and I was just like taking all these pictures of him. He's probably like, "What's that guy doing?" But he was so smooth and very fit, and just had this beautiful, shiny bike, and he was just all about it. And I was like, "Wow, this guy's like my hero." And sure enough, we're chatting away, and I'm like, "Hey, man, like, love your bike. I have the same one." And he's, "Oh, thanks. This is my old racing bike." And we get to chat, and you know how it is.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I know Joe. I know the bike shop.
Oh, nice.
And he's like, yeah. So he met you most recently, I believe, at the cab
the show. Yeah.
Yeah. I think his name was Ray. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. He used to work for Sigma.
Yeah.
He was the Sigma rep.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he
was with them and had this like sharp bike. So he was on our ride, and
cool.
We talked about the old racing days and racing at Downers and just all this kind of stuff. And yeah, and then there was another guy on there who he races a cat too, and he had some funny stories. He one time got a late call up to replace someone, I think it was, at Tour de Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Which had all the heavy hitters like Tom Danielson and Floyd Landis and like Lance Armstrong back in the day. And
so
he got a late minute call up, and I was like, "Oh man, that's amazing." He's like, "No, it was not amazing. I got dropped immediately. There were like TV cameras on me getting dropped. It was not amazing." So anyway, a lot of good folks on that ride. It was super fun.
Then that's what I mean by the Wisconsin scene is that that's basically where American bicycle racing. That was the hub of American bicycle racing. Everybody talks about Boulder, Colorado, and out west, and things like that. But really, Jim Okowitz and Tom Schuler and all these Wisconsin boys, and
the Heartland.
Yeah. Good friend of mine.
Or even like I remember reading the history of Waterford, and at some point they mention. It wasn't Christian Van de Velde, but they mentioned A. Van de Velde.
His dad.
His dad or...
His dad was in Breaking Away.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like that. It's like...
Yeah, the Midwest is...
The two circles of separation.
Indiana, if you take Indiana, Michigan, Frankie Andreu, that whole crew. You take Chicago, you have Illinois, Wisconsin, I'm sure Minnesota.
Germans and Christian Christian and John, his dad. They're Belgian and like old school Belgian. Like his mom, his grandparents were like Belgian.
His dad was an Olympian, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 72 Olympics, and and
he was on Team Shinzano and the breaking away. He's one of the evil Italians.
Yeah, he's one of the
it's a true story. Check it out.
That is so wild.
One time I got to tell this story super quick. So one time when I met Joe and I got to know Joe a bit, Joe would take me out on these amazing rides, which at the time were like blowing my mind. So he'd take me out to like Lamont. We'd go out in these like middle nowhere roads, and I'm just like, this is amazing.
So when you guys were like in high school, or
so I was in high school. Yeah, I was like a junior or senior in high school. Okay. So this is like 89 ish. And Joe was a little bit older, working at Cycle Smithy. So he hooked me up with like.
I was at Turin at that time.
Turin. He hooked me up with one of my first like bikes and like got me like the Motorola team jersey. I remember paying him, and he like brought it up. It was like such a cool thing. But long story short, I don't know, maybe you remember, but somehow we met Christian on the road. He was literally riding his bike, like doing a training ride. I believe this is how it went. Mm-hmm. But we met him out in the middle of nowhere in like the Lamont area where he's from. Mm-hmm. And we ended up just riding with him. And I was like, oh, who's this guy? And Joe was like riding two abreast with him. And I was kind of third wheel hanging in the back. And later he was like, oh, we went back to his house.
Yeah, we went back to his mom. Yeah, because he's younger than us. He was in high school.
Yeah, he was. Time. I was finishing high school. He was younger. Like he was that good, and he was a track star. Mm-hmm. So anyway,
actually,
velodrome.
He was just starting racing. So the way that I met him was that his dad used to race for Turin bikes, and I was working at the bike shop when they had a shop here in downtown Chicago, and his dad came in with an old Paramount, and he brought it and he said, "Hey, I want to get my son." I want to start my son to, in bike racing, and I've got this old Paramount. I don't want to buy him a new bike. So I got this whole Paramount, but I need junior gearing put on this bike.
Oh, that's right.
So that he can start, riding and racing. And so I have that background with his bicycle, preparing his first racing bike.
Do you know about junior gearing? Mm-mm. So with juniors, they would limit the gear size so that it wouldn't overtax their system. Until they were fully developed. So they would test your gears when you went to races that you didn't have too big a gear. And so it was a way to like basically help them from injuring themselves and like overtaxing themselves like when they were younger. So they junior gearing. I believe they've done away with it, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't think they have junior gearing. I don't think they've had it.
I think they stopped it now with technology and all the different gear ratios.
But the whole point was like, not so you wouldn't have too big a gear, and also teach people how to spin. Mm-hmm. So it kind of help teach good technique.
Kind of like old school Italian school. Like
they would they would do a rollout. Like they would have two pieces of tape on the ground, and then they would do one revolution.
The commissaires would roll the bike. If it went over, that meant you were like in the red. You had to redo your gear.
Yep. Yeah.
So it was like a whole thing.
So we were prepping the bike for, his dad came in with this bike. His son wasn't even a bike racer yet. Mm-hmm. And at that time I had already spent some time in Spain racing bikes. And I told his dad, I'm like, oh, you know what, if you want, me and some friends can take him out on a ride. He can go, we'll
show him what's up.
Yeah, we'll give him the honor of riding with us.
Future Tour de France.
Yeah,
top 5.
It's so like I got his number and I call him and he'd meet us somewhere in Lamont or on the road.
Amazing.
At that point, it was like you, me, and Chris Wasco.
It was incredible. Chris Waskevich.
Chris Waskevich, who's he was actually a pretty elite national caliber amateur.
Yeah.
At that time, who lived also on the he was also on the southwest side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So we had a cool little scene over there.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of us, but there was the few that were over there were pretty good. And
talk about talent, like Chris Wasco and like Van de Velde, and then there was us.
And then there was us. He came about from he came out of that, and I mean he rose really fast. Like he had good genes and good coaching.
It was kind of like a Taylor Finney. Like once he just touched the bike, it was like he was winning everything.
Yeah, it didn't take him.
You do have to have good genes to be pro tour cycling.
Yeah, but I remember being on bike rides with him, and he's like, I like golf. He was a really good golfer. He was like a top level high school.
Yeah, he wanted
golfer.
to go pursue golf.
He wanted to play golf. He's like, I really like golf.
And it turns out he has this like 1 percentile insane VO2 max aerobic engine, like just ride all day at 30 miles an hour kind of thing.
Yeah, and his dad knew everybody. So, I mean, his dad was kind of he's old school. So, I mean, it wasn't hard for him to.
I'd have to go back and double check how he was related to Waterford or Paramounts, but there was something there.
Well, he raced Paramount.
He raced.
Okay. Yeah, I think he raced a Paramount in the Olympics.
So to finish my quick story, so we ended up going back to Christian Benevent's house, and I think his mom gave us like iced tea. We're just like sitting there and kind of like, oh, we did like a ride, and we still had to ride back to Oklahoma. But I'm looking over like at one point, and I'm like in their living room or something, but there was like their trophy case, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh my god, like just millions of trophies and ribbons and medals and awards, and it's just like Olympics and this and that, and I'm like, holy cow. And then he's like, oh yeah, that's my dad, and he raced too, and he was just kind of, Christian was still very, very young, and I was just like, I couldn't believe what was going on. I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah,
'cause I was just kind of getting into it. I was reading like the magazines, and I'm like, I want to be a bike racer.
It was pretty wild to see that in the Chicago suburbs, I feel like.
Totally.
Yeah, it was like down this like side road. It was like it was not like
Lamont, Illinois.
Lamont, Illinois.
Right.
All places. It was a place that it was on our route.
Right.
So I mean, it was like on our regular route. It's like right off. So it was a great place to get some water.
Yep.
So it
has a decent climb if you want to do that. Like the only climb in the area, probably.
So for us, it was like I was thinking more like, oh, cool. Now I got a place to grab a free Coke and maybe a sandwich every once in a while. I wasn't really thinking like, oh, I got this bike racer kid now, or this guy's going to be a genius bike racer at some point. I was just like, oh, great, man.
Yeah. Fast forward, he was 4th in the Tour de France one year.
Yeah.
Just missed the podium by one, but won a bunch of U.S. national titles on the track, and just he would come by to Downers Grove after the tour sometimes and just do the crit and break away for a while, and like he'd be riding at like 30 miles an hour for like a half hour, and then he'd fall back into the race and let the sprinters go and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, super cool culture and all that. But back to Waterford, so I totally enjoyed it. That was super fun, and we ended up just finishing up there. Got a bunch of pictures, a lot of cool bikes.
There was one couple I do want to mention in the short ride group. They were so there was actually a fairly, at least on that ride, there was a fairly good mix of ages. There were some young kids, like probably college age, maybe a little bit older. Definitely,
it's a really good variety. Like they were really young
good.
and older, and
yeah. And then there was actually even some kid doing the ride on a single speed, which I thought was pretty.
Oh, I rode by him. He gave me his card. He's like a designer. He like paints bikes. Is it the guy who had like the fancy looking?
Maybe,
bike?
Yeah. I think that may have been him.
Because I saw that too. I was like, dude, you're doing this. I'm like, well, I can't complain. I got like 20 freaking years.
Yeah.
Here. Like,
but there was this one couple like much older, and I didn't catch their names, but they said that they met like it was very recently. It was only in the last year or two, but they met on some specific bicycling dating site.
No way, really?
It was like velo dating or bicycle dating. Or something.
I didn't know this was a thing.
And so they met on this bicycle dating website, and then they rode across the country together, and then they decided to get married after.
That is so sweet.
But I mean, that's such like a good test of like a potential marriage.
Totally.
Well, you can ride across the country and not.
For a second, I thought you were going to say a swinger site. I swear to God, I was like, wait a minute. But that's really cute. That's sweet.
It was very sweet, and they were strong. I mean, I was probably the most out of shape person in my group.
Well, there was a famous story locally, like here in the Midwest. There's a guy named Lon Haldeman, and they did a tandem. Him and his wife, his now wife, did a tandem. They won like a tandem race across America. And they weren't like, there was just like a winning magazine story about them, and it was just like local folklore about this.
Wow.
But I believe they weren't like really dating, but her parents would not allow her to ride, race across America with a man that she wasn't married to, so like they had to get married so
Oh,
she
man,
could do
right.
race across
A
America.
little scandalous.
The things we do for
Wow.
cycling.
Yeah, I think her name was Sue, like Notorangelo, or but yeah, it was like Lon Haldeman and Sue
Uh-huh.
something, and that was kind of that was a like a long time standing story here.
That's funny. I just remember the one thing you ever told me about tandems because I was like, oh, I might get a tandem, and you're like, think about it first. You might not want one.
Yeah.
I forget what you said about it. It was kind of like
They can
the wife is just looking at your butt the whole time.
Yeah, they
and
can-
like they can be kind of stressful and like fight inducing.
Oh yeah, I mean, they can make or break a relationship. I mean that because it's
Speaking of used bikes for sale,
Mhm.
you can find tandems for so cheap.
all the time.
Gee, no wonder why
For so
they've broken up so many marriages.
right.
Yeah, I sold so many of them at Cycle Smithy. I mean, like like I've never sold that many. I don't think I've sold tandems again since the time.
Well, they had a moment in the '90s, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to hang. I mean, it was probably before your time, but they used to hang in the bike shop. Like we used to have maybe 4 of them.
I
And
remember.
we
Wow.
would sell. Yeah, I mean, they were there. It was like Cannondale made a really beautiful one, and Trek was making one. I mean, they were making tandems,
Mhm.
and I would sell. It wasn't unusual to sell a tandem, but it was really common to get them back, like like people trying to
Mm.
return them and stuff. And that's where I learned. And I'm like,
This
holy
broke up my marriage. Can I have my money back?
I'm like, man, this tandem thing is disaster, man.
Well, now the gears are moving in my head. I'm like, maybe instead of like trying to learn how to weld and build a cargo bike, why don't I just buy one of these cheap used tandems
Mm-hmm.
and then turn that into a cargo bike?
Beware. Oh, there you go.
I worked with a guy. He had a great scam, and he would on his day off. We worked at Cycle Smithy. Josiah at Cycle Smithy.
Mm.
Remember Josiah? Did you ever meet Josiah?
I think I met Josiah at the dinner.
Oh yeah, he was at the dinner, and he had a purple Cannondale tandem.
Mm-hmm.
And on his day off, he would ride down the lakefront,
No.
park it at Oak Street Beach,
Pick up babes.
inevitably meet some poor tourist girl, usually a foreigner, someone from out of the
Inga
country.
from Sweden.
Yes. And then he would hightail it back to the bike shop, pretend like he needed to get an inner tube or something. But, at the bike shop, she would meet his friends and the people that he works with. And, oh, this guy's not a deranged mass murderer. He has a job and he has friends.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
And they would
God.
continue on with their ride. And inevitably, he would close the deal. And yeah, but this was like a regular thing that he would do. And like, it wouldn't be unusual on a Thursday afternoon or something for him to ride it with
That's such a bike shop dude thing to do.
Oh, totally
German
is.
tourists,
Just like an
Chinese
old
tourists.
sitcom
Oh yeah,
situation,
it was
right?
just like it was beautiful. It was to watch him work was like clockwork. He'd show up and I was like, "Who's next?"
that is.
I will say though, like working at a bike shop, especially when I was 22, 23, and had my big long hair,
Yeah, in Lincoln Park,
that was like
it was
at,
like
at least like girls my age
Mm-hmm.
were super into that.
Oh,
Like if you worked in the bike shop, you were cool.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
Oh, you were there in the fixie single speed, boom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was all bikes were becoming cool again. The cost of gas had gone through the roof again,
Mhm.
and
Well, that whole kind of messenger culture really blew up. I think it was, I guess it was kind of like Brooklyn influenced,
Yeah.
or
Fixed
San
gear.
Francisco,
Yeah,
and
Fixie's-
Is that like the
Single
big skier
speeds.
wave, like the first big one?
chrome bags. That was
Oh
like
yeah.
kinda when they were still
yep.
cool.
And we had all the cool stuff, so it was
Mhm.
like it was just it was a cultural hub more than just a bike shop, and it was a real kind of clearinghouse for everything, music and fashion, and just everything. I don't know.
So
I always loved
avoid tandems unless you're Josiah.
I just remember the one time I mentioned possibly looking into tandems. Joe he put his head and he closed his eyes.
it. Oh, don't do it.
He's like, Danny.
I used to
He's like,
I know.
no.
Oh,
He's
years,
like, it's
years
like,
ago when
don't.
I was
No.
active on when I was in college, I was active on couchsurfing.org.
uh-huh.
Oh,
It was kind of this like free, like you would just let people stay at your house for free.
right.
And I had this couple one time stay with me, and they were doing a bike tour across the country on a tandem. And I was only, I think I was probably a junior in college. So, I was still like 20 or something. And they were not much older, probably mid, late 20s. But they would anytime they would go into like a new city or new town, they would like hit up the local news channels.
Oh,
And be like, we're doing this ride across the country on a tandem. Isn't that such a
Right.
feel good, quirky, perfect TV
This
news
can end
story?
your half-hour segment like on a nice fun note.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it was like it was like they had this like natural PR instinct, which was kind of interesting. And so, yeah, they stayed over with me, and they're like they had to wake up really early the next day to go to like WGN or something.
oh, really?
And
Nice.
but they didn't really talk too much about the ride. You could tell it was like
Yeah.
kind of yeah.
It's all for show.
But then during I
They
think
can't wait to get off that fucking bike.
well, I'm sure it was stressful. I mean, but yeah, and then of course they go on TV and
No more burritos, honey.
it's exciting. Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, tandems are, and just the logistics of a tandem are just, you need a van to move it around. You just, where do you store it?
It's like what would happen if your chain snapped? You'd be screwed too, right?
It's like when somebody buys a tricycle from me every once in a while, that.
They don't realize how cumbersome and awkward it can be.
Yeah, I've had people show
Space-wise, you don't think of it until you like try to move it around. If you don't have like a garage and like a house.
No, I've had people like actually come in, like I order a special order. I show it to them on the website. They pay for it. I call them. They come and pick it. The day they come and pick it up, I roll the thing out to the front of the store, and I'm like, "All right, where's your truck or your van?"
Oops. We have a
And they're like, "Oh,
we have a Geo Prism.
we didn't think about that. We didn't think about that." Do you deliver? I'm like, no, man. I don't. I mean,
Well, seriously, I mean,
yeah, no. You need.
it's not like you pop the wheels off.
No,
or,
no, you
it's
don't.
not one of those cars. You need like kind of like your van, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Euro. What's it called?
Yeah, a Euro van or
Euro van.
something. You need a cargo van basically because you got to be able to roll that thing in.
You're not popping that thing into a hatchback. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had somebody bring one in for service. They had to rent a truck at Home Depot. They should. They should.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
$20
they're like-
for the first 2 hours.
Yeah, I was gonna say 10,
Yeah.
10 grand later.
Yeah, they rented a Home Depot truck just to bring it down to get a flat fixed and a brake adjustment.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll just put the pin in it. So anyway, Waterford was amazing. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but I had a great time. Super fun.
Mhm.
Sad to see them go.
Sad to see him go. It was really cool to, I don't know, it sounds cheesy, but just at least see a little bit of history
Mm-hmm.
and to see Richard Schwinn. He was quite busy that day, so we didn't get the chance to get a bunch of time with him. I know you wanted to speak with him a little bit more at length, but
Yeah.
it was, the vibe was cool, and it was, just like any meetup, it's always still really fun because it's like people who love riding bikes, they love great bikes, they want it, and I got the sense like people just really want like good companies to invest in. They want
Mhm.
they don't mind spending. Once you get to midlife, older, like you have some money, right? Like you want to buy something that's just not like a great bike, but also like, hey, this is a great brand, this is a great company. We like these people, what they stand for, what they're doing. And I'm sure you have versions of that in other walks of life, but I don't know. Yeah, it was definitely a little sad too.
Yeah.
You couldn't help feel a little bit of sadness, like, oh, this isn't going to be here anymore. Like this is gone. This is it.
Very, very kind of the story of the Midwest.
Mhm.
It's like kind of small fabrication, small industry,
Thousands of stories like that a day, man.
light industry, and then that's it. And then like after that generation's over, it's done. But the one thing, yeah, just to kind of sort of also to kind of wrap this up, I did I wanted to speak to Richard because I thought would be cool to include the audio in a podcast or just share it with you guys. But
Yeah.
But he just basically said like, no, I'm just too busy. Like I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was just like there was just too much going on, and
Yeah.
he was like, call me back in August. And this is also like I think in June still
Yeah.
or something. So at the time I was like, 2 months, okay.
You're
that's
like,
fine.
all right.
But now it's already almost August,
1st, maybe?
Yeah.
But
Let the dust settle and clear his thoughts. I get it. He
He
had
seemed pretty preoccupied.
he had an auction coming up. His business was closing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I can see.
and plus like and to be fair, it's like, I guess going back to that spirit of kind of the small business, small industry, he's not like some PR he's not like
Yeah.
spamming his stuff out there. So
Mhm.
he's probably
which
Yeah,
is probably part of the reason why they're no longer in business. I mean,
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like that was the one thing with Waterford is that you could kind of feel, there in the like handmade frames became a really big thing there for a while. Remember Vanilla and all these different brands that were popping up all over the place.
Oh, totally.
In the meantime, they were making beautiful bikes up in Waterford, Wisconsin. I mean, they had nothing. There was no shame in the stuff. They were producing beautiful bikes, but all these other big brands were taking all the limelight because they were great at social media. They were great at promoting themselves.
Well, I think like Rivendell's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Rivendell was like the Steve Jobs, where it's like they had the marketing genius.
Yep.
But then they just had Waterford build their frames.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what I mean. It's like it's just kind of time passed them by. The work was great, but they just didn't have that. Their colorways, all the they just kind of they got kind of stuck there.
100% agree with that. Like I remember I went to a couple NABs. You ever been to NABs, the National Handmade Bike Show?
Mm-mm.
So, it's just like I don't even know if it's still going, but I went to it a couple times, and like the brands there. I remember even seeing like Hampson, like Andy Hampson's brand, which is amazing bikes, but they weren't jumping off the social media pages, so to speak. Like, but then you had like other companies like Independent Fabrication and a handful of these other ones, and I'm sure they all had great quality bikes, but like they had like a social media presence. They had someone who knew social media, and you can hate that, you can love that, whatever. But the reality is like that's what a lot of marketing is, a powerful thing.
Yep.
And all the social media stuff you see, like that drives, I'm guessing, a lot of sales.
Well, the people that you mentioned that were on this ride, they're all guys in their 50s and up.
Yep.
And so they're
not trying to sell like to 25-year-old guys who love Matthew Vanderpool.
And those guys aren't buying brand new Waterfords. They're riding their 25, 30-year-old classic Waterford.
Yep.
Because the thing is, you buy one of these things, it's not like you're buying a bunch of them. You're buying one or two, and then you're a big fan. But you got to keep selling these things. And I think that's obviously one of the big things that I always notice with that brand, because I could try to sell it all day long, but people wanted something else.
Even the name, I mean, I love the name Waterford, don't get me wrong, so I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but even the name feels a little bit like quaint, like Waterford, almost has like an old English kind of vibe to me in some ways. Like I love their type, I love their look, but like it even feels like an old brand, like maybe not always in the best sense, if you know what I mean, as opposed to some of newer brands, but yeah, ultimately a little bit sad. Anytime a business ends is sad, of course, because that represents so many things to the people who own it, who are part of it, who work there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I hope that he had a great run and great career. Like we talked about Mark. He had a great career and great run, and I felt like he ended like on a pretty strong note, and like he's probably quite satisfied.
Well, and that's the other reality of it is that the boomers they're retiring now. Like this is their time to retire, and so.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll try and reach out to Richard, here in the next few weeks and see if we can kind of just get a quick call, because I remember calling him over the winter when I was looking at buying this. And if you just if you Google search Waterford Precision Cycles and there's the phone number and you call, he usually the guy answered the phone. Yeah. So. And he loved to chat. I mean,
he talks a lot.
We were just going and going and
He's
going.
a good talker. He was holding forth at the whole tour, and people were asking some questions. I would just say, AJ, if you can do that, I think you really should. And I know you're a very intrepid journalist, so you'll follow up on it. But you may, if you get the audio and record that, just obviously be like, hey, dude, let's record this for posterity. You may end up having the only audio kind of story that he gives on it. And if you want to come on the pod and talk about it as a follow-up, that could be really cool. I mean, Joe and I talk about this a lot. Like, there's like history and stuff that doesn't really get recorded. I always think of like Studs Terkel and stuff, like all his oral history stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff, and maybe we can be like a tiny little piece in the jigsaw puzzle that helps record some of this. Like we did the stuff with Mark, which I thought was pretty good.
And he might be able to get. We might be able to get some heavy duty help from Mark, our old boss.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah,
well, and the funny thing is that I won't share too much, but Richard basically, when I asked him if he'd speak kind of on the record or over a recording, he said he politely declined, but I did mention that I worked at Cycle Smithy and He's like, "Oh, I heard from Mark,"
Oh, that's right. He did. He
Oh.
mentioned that.
which is kind of funny. He's like, "Didn't Mark just retire?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, but speaking of the history, speaking of Waterford, so my buddy who's in Logan Square Preservation, he sent me this. Take a look at the bottom there and see where that event was being held.
It looks like it's a raffle ticket, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
For St. Sylvester Catholic School,
it was held at the Schwinn Hall.
Schwinn Hall.
Wow.
Right.
Dude.
So do you know? So Danny, you know, in Palmer Square, right there,
Yep.
you've got St. Sylvester.
Yeah. Right by the park.
On the far end there.
Yep.
But then their school, which is like very mid-century modern, is like just kind of like
Yes.
on the other corner.
Yes.
So the school, the
my
main
God.
hall there used to be called Schwinn Hall.
And that was in honor or sponsored or whatever.
Yes.
by the Schwinn family.
So
Okay.
so the original Schwinn, was it Ignaz Schwinn, right? Or what was his
Yeah.
name? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they had their family home on Palmer Square. It was the Schwinn Mansion.
Oh shit! I never knew that.
Was on Palmer Square.
Is it still standing?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Oh.
It might be. I'd have to double check.
I mean, that's one of my favorite parks. We go there all the time. I go running there.
Yeah, and so it's kind of cool. Like and then I know that there's some connection to Paramounts with
With Belmont Cycle, with
or Oscar Waston.
Oscar
Cycles.
Waston. Yeah, he built a lot of Waterfords.
So there's and that's a bike shop right there on Fullerton in Logan Square.
Mm-hmm.
Still there, and
And he's got a bunch of bikes hanging around in there. I mean, he's got.
I haven't been there in a while, but
bikes.
yeah, there's and yeah, it's pretty interesting that the Schwinn
That is
sort of
amazing.
family was all based around Palmer Square, and then what do rich people do? They donate money to schools,
Yep.
they donate money to museums.
Yeah. Well, I
And,
mean, all their factories. Those bikes were built here in Chicago.
Mhm.
I mean, they were built here in Chicago. There's an amazing history with Schwinn here in the city and manufacturing, and they had wheel factories. And I had one of the ladies across the street from my childhood home worked at the Schwinn factory and would bring. We couldn't afford a Schwinn, but she'd bring us the catalog so we could, and
At least look at them.
yeah, and it was like a thick catalog.
Yeah.
it was not like it was
Like the old
4
McDade's
pages.
catalog?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty substantial catalog full of bicycles. I mean, and accessories.
Oh my god, you could just read that for hours. Right?
Yeah, I mean, handlebars, streamers,
Everything, right?
kickstands, like everything on a bike. Imagine a
Kickstand.
catalog full of all that stuff. I wish I still had one of those catalogs floating around. I know somebody who does, probably.
That's amazing.
I'm sure Mark's got.
Oh,
those
I'm sure he's
catalogs.
got 10 of
But
them.
I have to say that inner nerd of me just loves that someone spied the word Schwinn on that little ticket, and just
he
was
sent
like
it to
bing,
me,
bing, bing,
yeah.
like that. That's like really cool.
Well, the other
I
thing
love
too,
stuff like that.
I don't have the photo immediately, but I know he's got some photos of this is like 100 over 100 years ago. They used to have crit races around Palmer Square,
Oh
Mhm.
man,
and that's like the perfect spot for it.
it's a perfect
Yeah.
crit course.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a rectangle. 4 left turns.
Mhm.
Perfect. That's
There's a park on the south side of Chicago on Garfield Boulevard that was built specifically for bike racing.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Which
and
one is
we've
that?
raced there.
Oh,
You
shit,
may have
dude.
done. You may have done a race.
Joe used to
there, but
drag me to races. It was so awesome.
Yeah, I think we raced in
In-
that park. I forgot what
in-
the name of the
We
park.
would
was.
do like the Cat 3 race like on a Saturday morning at like 8 a.m.
Is it Garfield Park?
I'm like,
not Garfield Park. This was like I'll get it.
Joe would pick me up, and we'd throw the bikes in, and I'm like, Joe, can we get Dunkin' Donuts?
Let's
and
go.
we'd go like
That's
Cat 3
awesome.
races, and I remember one of the first races I ever did a tour of Illinois. I'm pretty sure Joe and I were there. This is a true story. I'm not making it up. The guy on the start line was smoking a cigarette, and
Yeah.
he won the race solo. I'm like, look at that guy smoking a cigarette. What the hell's
so
his
funny.
deal? And he wins the race solo, and I'm like, God damn it.
That's awesome.
True story.
Well, the other thing, the thing that's kind of interesting though too about like crit races in the 1910s or 20s is that was really popular back then.
Yeah.
It was the
You know?
biggest sport in the world.
It was
It
it was huge.
It was
People,
it was the biggest sport in Chicago. Obviously, Major Taylor. You're
Mhm.
talking about like more velodrome, but also outdoor crit stuff.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, that was people who know the sport and know their history. Like that was literally the number one sport in Chicago. Is going there. Obviously, a lot of it had to do with betting. But that was the thing you did as you went there. I mean, it's bigger than baseball, football, anything, because a lot of those sports didn't even really exist, or if they did, they were so fledgling. It was just
And that was
coming
that was the old Europeans bringing that sport over from from the homeland.
true.
In Germany and in Belgium, the kermesses. Those things
Yep.
were done on Wednesday and Thursday nights. I mean, there was races every day of the week. I remember as a young bike racer, you would hear these stories. It's like, oh, you got to go to Belgium. You can race 5 days a week. Every night you can go do some bike race. So, and it was just, that was just part of the culture.
and here Major Taylor just crushed them all.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too because the plan of Chicago, the boulevard system, kind of the Emerald Necklace, was very inspired by European cities and European urban planning.
Yep.
You're blowing my mind with your cool knowledge. I love this. This is great to have AJ on the podcast.
Yeah, I know.
This is so enlightening. I just feel like I'm learning so much. I swear to God.
We have a
We'd
whole
be talking watts right now.
This is amazing. This is amazing.
But we do have a whole boulevard system in Chicago.
Yes.
And it goes all the way around the city.
Uh-huh.
And it's very, Parisian kind of style.
Right,
It's very
right.
influenced by European cities and
it needs to be adapted to today's to modern day use. If you go to like Barcelona, where they also have the boulevards, what they've done with those is they've put a bike lane right down the middle of those boulevards in the green space. Where
people would freak out.
I know they would.
Yeah.
You know what? I totally know. I know
for
that
good
they
and
would.
bad.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I know that they would freak out, but I drive through some of these boulevards in the city, and nobody's using the green space ever. I mean, maybe around here they
do now in Logan Square.
Like a
but
bit,
I remember like 10, 15 years ago in Logan Square, you'd never see anyone sitting out there. Ever.
Yeah. During the pandemic, especially.
Oh yeah.
But we obviously the farmers market has some ripple effects. But point well taken.
I will say I can push my fake hipster glasses up and be like, I remember Logan Square in 2006 when nobody sat out there.
Nobody was ever on the ground. Yeah, it was just overgrown and full of garbage.
I mean, Milwaukee Avenue was like low density industrial.
Yeah.
There was still a lot of small fabrication, light industry on Milwaukee Avenue.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I think if you were to put a bike lane down the middle of the boulevards, I mean,
it'd be cool.
I think it'd be
so Amsterdam.
I mean, think about it. Yeah, I mean, as far as use goes, use would go way through the roof.
It'd be amazing.
It'd be a big fight.
I would use it.
Yeah, I think everybody would use it.
Thanks for listening to the Bike Shop Society podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at mail@bikeshopsociety.com. If you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can look us up at Bike Shop Society. That's it. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Now, back to the show. Goodbye.
AJ, did you catch any of the Tour de France? Any of it at all?
No, I didn't really watch
follow
it
it
this
at all?
time.
Nothing?
No.
It was a very good race.
Yeah.
It's easy to miss as an American. I mean, it's not super unless you make an effort to try and
I was
watch
gonna say,
it.
I mean, I remember back when I was working at shops, it's you had to subscribe to Versus. It was a whole ordeal.
Oh, you said Versus. I love it.
Yeah, you had to
shout out
Versus. Subscribe to Versus, or I remember some friends and I would wake up early and go to Map Room because Map Room used to.
Oh yeah, there was a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, no, I didn't watch it. I kind of when because Alberto Contador got in trouble with doping, right? Or he
a little bit
doping.
He had a bad steak. That was his excuse.
Okay.
He literally said, "I ate a beef steak."
Once he got busted for doping, I was like, I think I'm just gonna stop watching this for a while.
So you really haven't seen much since then?
Not really, because that was also when all the doping scandals it was like dominoes.
Yep.
It was a little over.
It was like Floyd Landis, Levi Leipheimer, of course Lance,
Tyler. Yep.
I mean, it was all of them.
Yep.
All of them, even George Hincapie, all of these guys.
Oh, it was all those. It was Frank
yeah.
Andreu. I mean, they were all in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a thing, but
I've heard that Pro Tour cycling has, I mean, it's cleaned up, right, in the last few years.
As far as we know, so there's obviously cynics out there, and they look at all kinds of things and make speculation stuff. But from what I can tell, is a pretty semi-serious follower of the sport, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The testing is very vigorous. It's very rigorous, and there may be crazy shit happening. But as far as we know, the sport, as of right now, I say this, hopefully not going to eat my words in a year or two. Because we've seen some numbers from Vingegaard and Pogačar. Some people are raising little flags, but as far as we know, the sport is clean, and the testing has never been better. As far as we know, there's always
I would
that.
imagine that.
There's always that kind of disclaimer, is like as far as we know. So take that for what you will.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, I missed it this year, and I guess like kind of final thing I'll say is I did, and I really should have watched some of it because I always loved the drama of, the early stages. You have the sprinters and like the team dynamics going on, and I always loved the aerial shots of
It's a beautiful just
Tom Boonen and Mark Cavendish.
Oh, yeah.
going like 40 miles, 50 miles per hour, and then you get to the mountain stages, and then everyone drops, and you have. Do you remember Michael Rasmussen?
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
The chicken.
It's like the chicken. Yeah, and these guys, and you're like watching them, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
We follow each
It
other on
is-
Twitter. He's really funny.
It's like
He's a commentator for Danish TV.
the pure physicality
Yeah,
of it
that's
is just
amazing.
like
It's amazing.
incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy to see just how, like just the condition of these guys. Every single one of them now.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, you had maybe the top 20 were like this incredible conditioning, but and then the rest were just kind of. I mean, everybody was in great shape, but then you had 20 that were just phenomenal shape, and now everybody is just, just the level. The separation from the first guy to the last guy is way less.
Wow.
Yep.
Like way less.
True
now.
story.
Like, it's super, it's 10% versus 25%.
If that.
If that. I mean, it's
Could be
really,
like
What's
3
like-
or 4%.
What's
Yeah,
like the age range for today's like pro tour?
the person who wins now.
Or like what's like, because I remember, 15 years ago,
It's come down insanely.
Way
I was going
down
to say,
now.
because you had a really wide gap.
The
You had
traditional thing people always talked about was like your peak Tour de France winner years were like between like 27 and like 32.
people, like early 30s, right?
Like
Yeah.
27 and 32, like Big Mig, a lot of those guys, they were peaking in like late 20s, like around there. But Pogačar won, I think, at 21, and then again at 22. He's 24 now. I actually had this moment today. He won the best young riders jersey this year's tour again, and I'm just like, is he still a young rider? I'm like, oh my god, he's so young. But yeah, and then Vingegaard is only like 25, I think 26.
Okay.
But so no, it's come down a lot. And you have Remco. He hasn't ridden the tour yet, but he'll probably win it in the next couple of years, I assume. But he's not 25 yet, I don't think.
Which
But
you know what?
it's come down. It's
Which
come down.
it makes sense. Those are probably your peak testosterone years. Those are like peak, just as a biologically, you're probably peaking in those years, and now the kids are training like professionals from the age of 10 years old. I mean, you have YouTube now to teach you, you don't have to go search. You don't have to go meet some guy somewhere who's going to give you the special training plans and like,
In a dark alley.
and a diet. Yeah. To like follow, now,
Right.
every
I'll
kid,
meet you in Nice.
Now you have all the apps and stuff.
every kid is training like a professional
Well,
from the age of like 10. And, like as the minute they start racing, they have access to all of this information.
Power meters cost a couple $100 now. They used to be $25,000 for a power meter. Like
Yeah.
literally. Now it's like a
Wow.
couple $100. You can get them like for under 200.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You can get Stages.
Uh-huh.
They're a pretty big power meter company. There's one that SRAM, I think, offers a single crank arm. But they're
Interesting. I mean, I definitely remember when
Yeah.
they weren't. I can imagine they were that expensive.
the
but-
original SRAM that Bobby Julich and a handful of these riders had. They were, if you could get them,
Mhm.
and if you could, I think they were going for $15,000, $20,000, $25,000.
Yeah, the SRM
SRM.
system,
That was the
yeah,
I was gonna
famous
say, 'cause
original
I
one.
think when I was in college, they were still like $1,500, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
It was like a whole thing, and literally now, I mean, they're maybe not as good as some of the more expensive ones, but like the one I have, and I'm just a schmuck. Like the one I have is like $400 or $500, but even that historically is like nothing. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think I've told this story before that when I got to Europe in 1990, I had a heart rate monitor. I had I was from the United States, and I was working at like a top end bike shop. We had all the gadgets and all that stuff. And I
You had the
remember
polar heart
I
rate
had
monitor.
the polar heart rate monitor, just like all the pros.
Yep.
The top pros. So when I got there, I meet a first year pro, and he had just gotten a heart rate monitor, one of those polar heart rate monitors. Had no idea how it worked, and I had to show.
Wear on your chest.
And I had to show him how to use it. Like I had to program it and change the time and do all the little things on there because I'd been doing it for customers at the bike shop, and he was like one of the only guys. He was like one of the first pros to
For sure.
have that, because at his level you weren't getting all that free stuff, and you were having to buy all that stuff. I mean, he was like, he was on he was on Banesto.
Which is insane, which is now Movistar.
Which is now Movistar. I mean, he was like,
yeah. I mean, world tour top three team for sure.
Yeah, at that time. But he was just a domestique, his lower guy.
Right.
And, those guys would have to wash their own bike. He would take it to the bike shop, the night before heading out to a bike race and get it in, like,
Got some inner tubes.
yeah, he'd be like tuning up his bike and cleaning it,
Blew
and
my tires.
washing it at the local shop, and then he'd put it.
Wild.
They would just race by feel.
Yeah.
It was RPE, rate of perceived exertion. They just race by feel. How hard was that ride on the 1 to 10? Like your doctor asks you, what's that hurt 1 to 10? You'd be like, how hard was that ride 1 to 10?
Yep.
And the coach would be like, do a ride that hurts 9 out of 10 3 times, and then do 2 easy days. That's 5 out of 10. Like they just did rate of perceived exertion for millennia. And then all of
intervals.
a sudden, power meter comes along, everything changes.
Yep.
And now Froome is staring at his computer like, I better not ride over this percentage, this wattage. Oh my God.
So what were some highlights of this year's tour?
Well, Joe, what do you think? Did you watch some?
Yeah, I did. I paid attention to it. I watched a lot of highlights. I didn't watch a lot of the.
You're busy at
longer
the shop.
stages. Yeah, it was a really, really busy month for us. It was a battle between, it was 2 guys and then everybody else. So
Yeah.
it was basically a race between two of the top bike racers, and really a guy that
Until it wasn't.
yeah, and I didn't really think that the guy who won was going to be anywhere. I just didn't think he had that in him,
Yeah.
But I think it also has to do with the fact that the guy who finished second, Pogacar, the guy, you don't know any of these guys, but I think, he's been racing since the beginning of the year. He didn't train specifically just for one race all year long. He had a injury.
Broke his wrist.
He broke his wrist, so the timing wasn't perfect for him. He didn't show up in exactly the top condition. But I think really the early season racing took a toll at the end of the day. I think that the guy that he was racing against prepared all year specifically for this race. So he came in and he showed up in perfect condition, and he was, the other guy was 1% off basically, I mean, that's how little the margin
Right.
for error is.
Were they trading the yellow jersey back and forth, or
Not really.
I don't think they
once
ever traded it.
Vingegaard got it, he pretty much kept it. He didn't take it early on. Pogacar's teammate, Adam Yates, there's Simon and Adam. They're twins and they're bike race together, and they're both like almost equally good. His teammate won it and took it the first day. And it's funny you're talking about the early sprint stages. So this year they put it on its head, and they started with like crazy steep like climbing stages in the Basque Country, northern Spain. So it actually opened with a boom. Like there was some like super good fun stages. Like Basque Country is insane. Like the fans, are super huge. So it was a really cool opening. I didn't want to hijack your thoughts there.
No,
but
it was a beautiful race. It started with a lot of fireworks, and it didn't let down. Really,
it kind of kept going. Yeah,
it kept going. Like at one day, that's why it was so hard to keep up with, because there was a lot of action in this year's race. And, considering that it was just a 2-man race for the most part, but it was pretty exciting throughout the race, and right up until the last week, they were within a minute of each other basically. I mean, it was like the tightest Tour de France until the last week ever, and finally the guy who finished second, just got a little bit worn down. In fact, there was
he cracked. So there were two really bad days he had. The one, it was a time trial.
Mm-hmm.
So they were super close within 10 seconds. So the Danish guy, Vingegaard, who eventually won the race, was leading, and Pogacar was clawing. He lost a couple of seconds here and there, and he was clawing back.
Mhm.
So he was in 10 seconds. So they're basically in an essential dead heat. Vingegaard just happened to have the yellow jersey, so they're basically co-leading the race, if you will. But then they had the time trial, the one and only time trial the whole tour. So it had mostly flat the first part, I think, a little gradual false flat kind of thing, and then the last part was just a climb. So that was the real deal. Vingegaard crushed it, and Pogacar, the second guy, the Slovenian who has won 2 tours, he lost almost 2 minutes, well over a minute. So, which was like insane. Like, usually they lose like 8 seconds, 13 seconds. Like, he lost over a minute, and people were like, "Oh shit! Like, this could be the end." So then fast forward a couple mountains. Actually, I think it was the next day. So they did this horrendous climb, the Col de Loze, Loze, Loze. They kept talking about it. Murderous climb. Murderous, long, steep, insane. Like, even the climbers were like, "That's fucked up." Pogacar cracked. He lost 6 minutes. I mean, he cracked. Like, and there's a great bit. So now they're incorporating the team car audio into the Tour de France
Oh, wow.
production. And so they just put up little blips to kind of make it more interesting for folks. And Pogacar was on his team radio, and he goes, and it's now become like famous, but he said, what did he say? "I'm done. I'm dead." Like, whatever he said, it was like, I think he said, "I'm done. I'm dead." Like, he just cracked.
It's like a shut up legs.
Yeah, no, yeah, but in reverse, like, he just had nothing to do. So he got dropped, lost 6 minutes. So basically the race was over. So he ended up winning a stage, which was a nice little consolation prize, I guess. But amazing tour. Vingegaard, like, amazing. People pronounce his name 50 different ways. But Vingegaard, Danish rider. So he won last year, won again this year. So amazing, just super powerful everywhere. He dominated the TT. He dominated the climbs. There was never any. He did everything perfectly. He kind of had like a perfect tour. Didn't really have one issue. I don't think he crashed even once. I don't even know if he had a flat tire. I mean, it was just like that perfect tour. Everything was in his favor. But some other cool storylines there. So Mark Cavendish, the guy you mentioned earlier, the best sprinter of all time in most people's opinion. He came back with
missile, right?
Yeah, the Manx missile. He came back with Astana, and
wow,
they just hired him. I mean, this is my take. Basically to win his record-breaking stage in the Tour. So he tied Eddie Merckx last year. I think it's 32, 33 stages. I can't remember. 30-something. Whatever it was, he was tied with Merckx. He is tied with Merckx. But, he announced it was his last season. This is the last tour. And he, so he was crawling up in the sprints. Like, Philipsen was the star of the sprints this year. Jesper Philipsen, the Belgian, he won 4 stages. He was second today on the Champs, so he almost won 5. He was like clearly the fastest guy, but Cav has not always been the fastest guy, but the craftiest guy. Because as they say, it's usually not the fastest rider who wins the race. It's usually the craftiest guy, the guy who could take advantage of other folks, slipstream, NASCAR shit, like doing all that stuff.
Well, there's a lot of physicality. In those
totally.
fights,
Argy bargy, elbows,
on each
leaning.
other.
Totally.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Cav is a small guy. Most sprinters are pretty big. He's quite small. But what happened was he was clawing back in each of the sprints, and he finally got perfect position. He was kind of freelancing, and he gave Philipsen a run for his money, and they were both going. I remember watching it because I watched most of the stages live in the morning, and I thought he was going to win it. I just got like those little goosebumps. I'm like, oh my God, history is happening. He's going to win this fucking sprint. He had a little mechanical.
Oh no.
His and there's been some speculation. Ceramic Speed. So they do these oversized pulley wheels, and they're supposed to give you like a few watts extra. They're a little controversial. So it's supposed to be a little bit lighter, a little bit faster. Some teams use them to get that tiny little marginal gain. Anyway, his 11 and 12 were going back and forth in the sprint. It wouldn't sit pretty.
Oh.
And so he basically, again, who knows what would have happened, but I think his take and a lot of people's take was he probably would have won that sprint, but his chain was literally skipping from the 10 and 12, like back and forth in a million.
So someone got chewed out
seconds.
after that stage.
Well, a lot of people were like, so he's riding ceramic speed, which I don't think he's traditionally done, but they're a sponsor.
Oh, okay.
And the guy who won was riding the regular Shimano. Anyway, who knows? But he was very, very close to winning that stage. Like it wasn't technically a photo finish, but it was almost a photo finish. And that could have been his record-breaking one. So that was his last tour. A couple stages later, he crashes, breaks his collarbone.
Okay.
So he was out of the tour. So that's the end of Cav's history. That's it. That's it. He's retired. He's done. So super sad. I believe that's his last race. There's speculation that he'll get a contract to come back again. So that's like a whole thing unto itself. But that was one of the storylines. Like, what a horrible way for Cav to go out. I've never been the biggest Cav fan, but I was really sad for him.
Yeah, I mean that's like growing up in Indiana, being a Reggie Miller fan.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that's like growing up in Indiana, period.
Yeah. It's like living in Indiana.
Like breaking your collarbone.
Living in Indiana as a kid, and when Michael Jordan went to go play baseball for 2 years, we're like, okay, this is Reggie Miller's chance.
Yeah.
White Sox, baby.
And he stayed his entire career in Indiana, never won a championship. Anyways, not the same thing.
No,
but,
so anyway, like the Cav thing was like a big storyline. Obviously, that was something that was amazing. The early stages in Basque Country for me were like amazing. To start the tour off with like 2 or 3, like, I mean, they had the thousands and thousands of feet of climbing in the first 2 stages. I mean, this was the climbiest, I made up that word, climbiest Tour de France. I don't know about ever, but definitely in modern history. Like the amount of climbing in this race was
brutal.
fucking insane. So that was a big storyline. Philipsen won the sprints. He won 4, which is insane to win 4 sprints. Like percentage wise, how many out of 21 stages? That's a big chunk.
That's a lot, yeah.
The climbs were big. The fight between Pogacar and Vingegaard was huge. Pogacar cracking was huge. He looked very mortal. But the climbing thing was kind of cool. The KOM, like Nielsen Paulus on the EF education team. He's the first Native American rider in the World Tour. He was wearing the KOM jersey for a long time until he didn't, and then Ciccone got it. But he's on Trek, so at least it's a Wisconsin company.
There you go.
And SRAM won the Tour de France, which is cool. They beat Shimano out last year. They took over sponsorship of the Killer Bees, the Jumbo Visma team.
Which, in case people aren't aware, SRAM is based in their corporate headquarters is in Chicago.
That's right, down in Fulton Market.
Mm-hmm.
And then the KOM was Trek and also SRAM. So American brands crushing the Tour de France and the World Tour. Other than that, I mean, very hard racing.
Crowds were huge.
Thibaut Pinot, the great French, one of the most loved French riders, if not the most loved riders. He retired. That was his last Tour de France. He got a lot of love. I think he won the Super Combativity Award or was in the running for it. So that was a big storyline.
I did see a clip of like a fan, like an excavator holding him up on a bicycle, and he's like pedaling.
Yeah.
And the camera angle from the helicopter makes it look like he's actually...
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Stijn Wandel from Belgium, and you are listening to the Bike Shop Society podcast.
Whoa, hold on a second. Yeah, Danny is taken off, and he is now riding through the yard on Adrian's vintage Waterford. I guess it's vintage at this point, right?
93. Yeah, I guess
that's a 30-year-old bike. It's a beautiful bike, campy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like a hodgepodge of parts. It's actually really fascinating.
Did you put that shifter on there, or was that
that's
the way you bought it?
This is exactly how I got it, except the pedals.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a beautiful bike.
It was kind of I think I told Danny part of the story, but God, the process of buying it was like one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced in my life.
Really?
Yes. Should I tell the quick version?
Do it.
Okay. So I found it on, of course, Facebook, and
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
I don't know what world you live in, but the world I live in, people are like Facebook, boo, bad, like has been, nice try. McDonald's of social media.
Yeah.
But isn't it funny how it's become like kind of a hotbed for like selling bikes and shit?
Well,
Like everyone I talk to is like,
check out Facebook Marketplace. They don't say eBay first.
Mhm.
They say check out Facebook Marketplace.
fees
And
on-
I'm like, okay, sure.
Facebook's been smart because they know that millennials and Gen Z don't use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the only thing I really use Facebook for is just classifieds.
So I
Mhm.
quit Facebook. I deleted my account.
Mm-hmm.
And for like a few years, like didn't do anything. But Joe mentioned it to me one time, and I was like, oh, and I heard other people talking about it.
Mhm.
So I signed up a new Facebook account, brand new one, not my old shit, and just so I can use Facebook Marketplace. So that's all I use it for. So I don't even go on the regular Facebook, but so I have this most nondescript, like it's not my name. I don't have a photo. Like it's like I'm
Right.
basically not there, but I'm just there to see Facebook Marketplace. It's just kind of a funny thing.
It is. I mean, it is really interesting. And it also kind of coincided with Craigslist getting really bad for scamming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Craigslist got so bad.
And spamming.
And but
Just garbage.
so I found this bike, and coincidentally, the seller, I don't think it was the guy I bought it from, but there was a post on Reddit about this bike from a long time ago, and someone was like, "What's this bike worth?" Like, I can acquire some bikes at this estate sale, and there's a couple bikes, and one of them was a Bianchi Pista, and then this one. And then all the commenters were like, "Oh, like, $300, something like that. Like, you can get that for that. That'd be pretty good." And so, anyways, I forget what they were asking when I was messaging. I think that they were asking like 700 or 750, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
which is, that's not bad for an old Waterford, I think. But I offered them 600, and then he finally, like after a day or two, got back to me and said, "Okay, I'll take it." And they were in Madison, but I was visiting Door County at the time, so I was like, "All right, I'll make a little trip through Madison on the way back." And so when I get there, I showed up, kind of suburban. It's like a suburb of Madison, right outside the city. And the guy was very, very nice. But he had two kids there. They were kind of playing. This is at night too. And I was like,
you told me this.
it's at night. And like, I made
pretty funny.
like a special trip out of this too. So just to kind of like, as a little
You
build up.
definitely went out of your way a bit.
I went really out of my way.
Door
a bit.
County, Chicago is going to Madison's like a big left turn.
It's a big turn out of the way. Anyways, I get there. The guy's very nice. And actually he had a Paramount, like an old like 60s or 70s Paramount, and that was his bike that he commuted to work on and like loved it. And then he acquired this, I think, from the guy who bought it from the estate. But anyways, we're talking, we're just hanging out, and his kids just kind of keep like going up to him and, "Hey Dad, blah blah blah." And Dad's like, "Okay, can you guys go play? Hold on, wait."
And as a parent, you know exactly like how that goes.
Yeah, and so I'm just being cool. It's fine. It's no big deal. But then at some point they're like yelling and screaming, and the dad's just like, "Okay, can you please go outside and play?" Like, and then we're
They
like,
didn't get the memo.
yeah, and then at
I'm doing business here.
yeah, exactly.
Got a guy from Chicago buying a bike.
And then at one point, then like the little girl walks up and she's holding a pine cone that she grabbed in the yard. And I'm holding the bike, like I'm holding it, and I'm talking to the dad, and he's like kind of like where you are. And she walks up with the pine cone, she starts stabbing the seat, the saddle, and it's like an old turbo. It's like this like mint condition,
Oh,
like old turbo
Jesus.
saddle.
On this bike or on the bike that on his
No, on this
on
bike.
one? Oh, gee.
Yeah, I took the turbo saddle off, but and she's like scratching, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Thinking the dad's gonna say something, and then he just totally doesn't say anything.
Because you bought the bike. It was your bike already. He didn't care.
Yeah, and then well, I didn't buy it yet.
Oh,
we were still kind of doing the transaction because he was also now unsure if he wanted to sell it,
Oh,
and I'm just like, "Bro, are you
come on, dude. You can't
Like-
like you put it up. Come
Yeah,
on, be
I'm
faithful.
all the way over here. I came
Like,
all
if-
the way up to buy it.
yeah. If I drove to like Park Ridge and he's like, "I
Yeah.
don't know," I'd be like, "Okay, like it's really not a problem." I get it. I've done that before. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's you don't feel good, but I don't wait until someone gets there. I'll just
There must be a
delete.
German word for that.
I'm sure there
It's
is.
like 50 letters long. That's like you're selling something.
Yeah, I've
and
like
you change your mind during the transaction and you don't want to sell it. There's got to be a German word for
yeah.
that.
Well, so I've never. Let me rephrase. I've never done that when someone's actually come and met. I've been like, someone messaged me and I'm like, actually, I don't.
Oh,
wanna
okay.
sell it."
Before the meet.
Yeah,
Before
I'm
the
like,
meet.
I'm like,
Okay.
it's not available anymore.
Yeah.
Whatever. But this guy is actually starting to like change his mind as I'm there.
Oh shit!
gee.
And then
This kid's annoying. You're like, oh god.
and then the thing that really kind of like where I actually did get upset was again, like I'm kind of holding the bike, we're kind of checking it out. The kids are just being obnoxious, and then at one point the one kid kicks a soccer ball right at the bike. And it just bangs up against the
These are brats.
it bangs up against like the crank or the down tube. And it wasn't just like they kind of like lightly, like accidentally, he like full on kicked this bike, kicked the ball into the bike.
These are brats.
And then I didn't say this, and I'm glad I didn't like, step out of line or anything. But I was about to be like,
Lose your cool.
and be like, can you tell your kids to go inside? You're doing business,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Hello, kid.
Because I don't know about you guys, but my parents would have smacked the
Oh,
shit
yeah.
out of me.
Yeah.
I would have been
for that.
smacked so hard.
And
I'd still have the handprint.
but I'm for real. My dad would have
Oh yeah.
kicked my ass for doing something like that.
We would have never been there first place. We would have been on the porch. Like, don't you get off that.
Did he
porch.
give him a
Right.
buddy? Hey, buddy.
Basically,
Yeah.
it was just sort of like,
Why'd you quit
hey,
that, buddy?
hey, can you please go play with your sister? And I feel bad like saying this because he
Remember
was.
what we talked about?
Hey, bud.
I mean, again, like I feel bad for saying this because he was such a nice guy, but it was just like
Hey, bud.
I was telling Danny the whole thing was that this was supposed to be a special moment for
Yep.
me. I finally got my Waterford.
Yeah.
Like,
I've been
this is-
there. I've
There's
been
like
there.
there's been like a lot of buildup in my life for this, and then I go and get it, and then the kids just ruin it. for me.
Anticlimactic.
And then
Turns into an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
and then that nice turbo saddle and seat post, I guess I just left it in the yard and I forgot it. But
Oh shit.
but he did send it to me, but I had to like beg him to send it.
Oh.
And he's like, all right, well, we can put it in the mail, but we'll tell you how much it is for shipping
Oh,
it.
thanks, buddy.
And I'm like, bro, it's going to be like $5.
Right.
Can you not
That's
like just do me a
so
solid here?
lame.
So yeah, I just send them like $6
Oh
for shipping.
Jesus! What a cheap ass.
Wow.
Thanks, buddy. I mean, you paid him how much for that bike?
It's like 600, yeah.
That's lame. Was it the turbo that had the yellow and black on the back, the plastic?
No.
That's a turbo. That's the one I had.
It's like the uncomfortable one.
Oh, the big roundy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like when I 2008, 2009 at Cycle Smithy, turbos were like cool again, and
Those were the Thai ones.
Oh, the Thai ones?
I think
But I never understood because I always found them to be super uncomfortable.
I rode the Turbo-Matic, which had like a split, and it was yellow.
That's the one I had.
That was
Yep, that's
that
the
was
one
the
I had.
class.
the
that
one.
was
Okay.
really popular.
That was a
Like,
super hot saddle
Yeah.
at that time. Yeah, anybody in the early '90s.
You have to develop the butt muscles. That's all.
Mhm.
But he helped me put it in the car, and I had my dog with me so I was kind of thinking like, well, I don't know if this is even going to fit.
Like an emotional appeal. Like, I got this dog. Give me the deal. Tell your kids to go away.
Well, and then when I got the bike home, I thought there was something wrong with it. I think I told you because I was like, I don't know if I should bring it because I think that there's something wrong with the cranks.
yeah, you were like some of the bottom bracket or
Or the bottom. I thought
something.
something was wrong with the bottom
And
bracket.
I was
of
like,
the cranks.
maybe ride what you know, because.
And then I messed with it more, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, this thing's riding so weird. What is this? And then after inspecting it further, I just didn't have one of the sides fully seated all the way into the chainstay. So the freaking tire was rubbing against the
the frame,
The inner
stay.
frame.
Yeah.
That'll do it. It's like you got
And
a
it-
brake on, yeah.
yeah, so it kind of rubbed the paint away in that one little spot, which is annoying, but it's like
Yeah.
All right,
Oh, it's nothing.
you rode it.
Nothing
It's
burger.
okay.
right.
You gotta ride it.
Nothing
Yeah.
to worry about there. But it felt great riding it in that little
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
grass.
I will say, like, I mean, when I rode it around his little culvert there, like a little, what do you call it?
roundabout, like a
Roundabout there,
Cul-de-sac.
whatever, cul-de-sac. Yeah, I did. Like, you could tell, or like, wow, like this is a high-end.
It feels
Steel
smooth and just
bike.
like the road feels like beautiful. It feels really smooth and stable and just like
Mhm.
it feels fast. Like it just wants to go. Like you pedal and it goes. Like
Although I will say that, like, my preferred, because that's like a straight up road. That's like an old school like road racer
Yeah.
geometry. I would have definitely liked the road sport or touring
Sure.
geometry.
I mean, you could play a little bit with different things. You can get, I don't know how wide a tires you can put on there. Probably not super wide, obviously, but if you can get some like slightly wider tires,
I could do like a 650.
Yeah, that,
conversion,
you just look at that bike. The front end is really steep.
yeah,
You just see that fork is
Yeah.
almost straight to the ground.
Yeah.
It's just like
that's like a racer. But
yeah,
you can get, you could double wrap the bars. People do that.
Mhm.
More comfy. You can get a more comfy saddle. You can get a dropper post.
Yeah, bigger tire. Just a bigger tires alone will give you like whoa.
right.
If you can
Bigger tire
squeeze a 28 in
like
there. Yeah.
Like that you can go lower pressure. Like you'd be surprised at how much that can do if you wear a good bike short, if you wear gel gloves, like all that stuff like matters. So you can make it more
Soften
comfy.
it up, right?
Yeah, it won't ever be like, a gravel bike or something, but like you can make it more comfy.
At the same time, this one was for sale. I don't know if it's at the same time or shortly after, but there was another guy, but actually more local in the Chicago area. It was the exact same bike that I would have ordered.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a kind of more touring Waterford. It was like a forest green, and it had the classic logo, not the like script. It was like the kind of just like the nice,
Yeah.
like
that
the
Waterford.
cool, nice, yeah. And it had the sort of the what do you call them on bikes? Like the sort of like stripes or the panels,
Yeah, it had the panels on
panels.
there.
And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, it's perfect. Like that's the one I want. It was sort of like the off-white panels, like
Yeah.
what's that color? Like not beige, but anyways, forest green, off-white,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. But it was like a 56. I'm like,
Yeah.
so
You're a big boy.
yeah.
That'd be too small for you. I've tried to go smaller.
No, and I'm at the point now where like I always rode 58s
Mhm.
always, but I'm at the point now where like I prefer like 60s now.
No way.
Yeah,
Really?
like I want like a nice big comfy bike now.
Hmm.
Because I was even telling Danny, like, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it because I felt at first it was a little too small for me, but I think it's the right size. I just need to get back into shape.
Well, it's a great bike, and hey, like it's clear you love it, and you went through all that stress. You finally got it. Damn those brats! Hope they get some manners about them. But I will just mention, I also got a new bike.
You got a new bike.
I got a new bike. Well, new since the last podcast. Well,
Really?
new-ish.
We didn't cover that, I guess?
Super 6.
Yeah,
we
the
guess?
Super 6.
Well, we didn't really.
Oh,
We didn't.
okay.
I guess
really
we
go-
never really
We
covered
were
the bike.
kind of covering it.
Yeah.
I'm just milking it here a little bit.
No, yeah, he did. He got a brand new, like a rocket ship.
Joe
like
hooked me.
modern.
Joe hooked me up.
Yeah.
So Joe hooked me up. So what's cool is Joe hooked me up with a Merlin at
Mhm.
Cycle Smithy. He was still working there, and I was going to New York. This is 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, Joe, I'm going to New York. I'm making a little bit of money. I definitely was still in debt with things, but I was like, I got a little bit of money in my bank account. Like, I kind of want a decent bike. And I was going to a job where I was going to get a full-time salary. Nothing crazy, but like something decent. And I'm like, I think I could probably afford something a little bit nicer. So he hooked me up with a Merlin and a Dura-Ace. It was great.
Titanium.
Like I say, that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it
a
was
sweet
amazing.
bike,
And I
yeah.
had that bike for 20-something years. I sold it kind of begrudgingly, but anyway.
The kind of stuff that was laying around Cycle Smithy
Yeah.
at that time, right?
And he's
Just
like,
a Merlin with
he's
dirt.
like looking around. He's like, yeah, I think, let me just look around. I think I can get you something. And
Yeah.
sure enough, so it was great. But anyway, full story, full circle. I was looking at the new Cannondales, and I was like, Joe, I think I want this bike. So Joe hooked me up. I got a Cannondale Super 6 Evo 1, which is like nice mid-range. Yeah, just super nice road bike. Everything internally routed, no cables showing. So it's like brake cables. It's got SRAM, so there's no wires. Beautiful bike. It has like 3 different colors depending on how you look at it in the sunshine. So super nice. I was out on it today, so I got some miles in it at this point. I'm really liking it.
Yeah,
I'm
we
like
started.
super excited about it.
We actually started building it the night that that we did the last podcast together. That was it.
That's what
Danny.
I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah, that was Tony Tony, the world traveler. He was off to Scotland.
all
and-
full circle.
Yeah, and the last time I saw him, he was somewhere in France. I haven't checked on him.
I haven't
lately.
checked. I don't know if he's posted in a little bit. I want to
Yeah.
check it out. Just real quick. So I don't know if you caught this, but this guy Tony,
Mm-hmm.
who came into Joe's shop. Joe could tell you the whole story, but he came into the shop, and Joe got to know him. And turns out this guy's he's riding around the world on his bike, on his Surly. Was this Surly?
I think it was a Kona that he had.
Oh, Kona. Okay, so he's right on this Kona. So anyway, he comes into the shop the day like we're building my bike, and so we did this like double thing on the podcast. But he was literally setting off to Scotland to start his trip like that following Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So we did like this podcast where it's like we're getting his bike finally prepped. We did like a little tune-up, new tires, and then we had my bike in the stand. So that was the last time we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
That's
This
awesome.
guy, and that was Tony going out. So yeah, we're gonna check up what he's been doing. He posted pretty regularly for a bit, but I think he maybe is taking a little break or something.
Yeah, he might be hanging out in France. I mean, that's what he said on the podcast, was that he would, not necessarily just plow through and go around the world, but maybe park it and
Mm-hmm.
maybe meet a girl or something, and
or work, or
yeah,
work for a couple of
Yeah,
weeks, do
that's
some
right. He said
seasonal or whatever.
yeah. He said might try to, if you found a place that he liked, and maybe score
awesome.
some work for a little bit,
And
hang out.
he was just like a walk-in, huh?
He was just a walk-in, yeah. And he was like this dude, and we just struck up a conversation. I'm like, "What are you doing with the bike? Where are you going?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to go ride around the world." I'm like, "Wait a
Really
second." I'm like,
cool guy.
Yeah.
No pretensions, no fuss. Just
Yeah.
like very in shape guy who's like clearly got like lots of thoughts about the world, kind
Mhm.
of philosophical.
Mhm.
And
played in a band.
had this like well, you played in a band, so you
Yeah.
guys would have stuff to talk about.
Mhm.
But like no frills, has like a nice bike, but kind of a basic bike, and he just literally had a tire in his hand. He's like, "Can you put this tire on? I'm riding around the world." Like
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, "This is amazing."
Honestly,
And,
like that's
coolest guy.
honestly like that's kind of like what, if I could just retire today, like that's kind of, I wouldn't want to go around the world, but like I would-
Start riding.
I would like to do like the Great Divide and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Oh, yeah.
like- so I would just do stuff like that, and it's kind of funny because I talk to people and I'm like, God, I would just retire if I could, and they're like, well,
Mhm.
why would you, like, what would you do? I'd be bored. And I'm like, I've got like 10 bikes now I've got to fix up, and guitars. I've got hobbies.
Yeah,
and things I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So he set off on his
It's
world
amazing.
adventure literally a couple days later, and it was kind of cool because he's like, I got like kind of ideas, but I'm kind of gonna wing it a lot, and we're like, awesome, we're so jealous, but yeah, we built up my bike at the time, but yeah,
Well, we started. We
So-
pulled it out of the box.
yeah,
Mm.
We had a mechanic breakdown, but we'll cover on another podcast. That's.
I'll let you lead on that one.
Yeah, that's bike shop talk.
Bike
But,
shop talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
we got my bike set up, loving it. Thanks to Joe in the shop, and
Awesome,
so cool.
man.
I'm really
Isn't it-
digging it.
Yeah. I've seen him riding it. So
Isn't it kind of cool how like, isn't it interesting like with bike technology when you think like they can't improve on this anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden the bikes are like even more
Yep.
crazy, and you're like,
Yep.
holy shit,
Yeah, it was really the experience of getting Danny's bike in the shop. Not that I haven't worked on some fancy bikes recently, because I have. I built some cool bikes, but it was just a reminder that that I do kind of like that stuff. It's frustrating because you have to learn it all. You have to learn how to work with all that stuff.
Yeah,
all
isn't
this
like
new stuff.
stems are integrated now?
Yeah,
or
they're very
something? I mean,
fussy.
so
Like it's
sorta-
just very particular. Like there's only like one way to do it, and you kind of
They're finicky.
It's not-
they're just very different.
it's
than
not
they
always
were
super
even 10, 15
intuitive.
years
Like,
ago.
it's kind of like you got to thread the needle through things. And,
There's nothing simple about it. Right. So there's no simplicity. And so part of the curmudgeon side of me is like, oh man, look, you can see the cables. It's easy to build. Look at how easy it is to fix it.
You just want to take a wrench to it and just
Yeah, but
crank on it.
at the same time, I catch myself saying stuff like that. And I'm like, wait a second. All these old guys that I've worked with over the years, these old mechanics that I have around me and that I've had working for me, these old timers,
Mhm.
that's how they talk. They're
Mhm.
just like, fuck this old shit. Jesus Christ. Look at this stuff. And, like,
Oscar the Grouch.
oh, yeah, they're like their bicycle, they're the highlight of their lives were like 9-speed. It was
Yeah.
like 9-speed, campy.
That's
right?
that's kind of
Like
me,
that
though,
bike,
still.
literally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that bike. Like that's their era.
It's kind of like
right.
frozen in time because he's literally got campy cranks, and I think
Yeah.
that's a 9-speed.
Yeah, it was like, oh, that was good. That was the height. That was the height of bicycles. Anything after that just sucks.
Bike snob calls them
Yeah.
retro grouches.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, everything sucks after that, right? What do you need all this shit for?
Electronic, my
Horrible
ass.
crap.
Well, it is also pretty wild too. Like because I didn't really know. When you mentioned you got a new bike, I was just curious because I always remembered Cannondale as like the aluminum.
Yep.
Crit
Oversized.
bike.
Yep.
You know, that was like the crit bike. And
Yeah.
then I was like, I wonder what Cannondale is now. And I went and looked, and totally different company, totally different bikes. I mean,
Yeah.
and also like the technology has changed, but so have the prices. I mean, these are not like,
Yeah.
these are not
Oh,
cheap.
for-
These
I
are
mean, they're
not-
definitely a more upscale brand now for sure. I mean, I feel in some ways.
well, just in general, like even
Yeah.
like, you know, your other bike, like
yeah.
these are not just like a on a whim purchase.
No.
No,
and-
I thought about that a long time. I did a lot of deep research. I mean, I went back and forth as I try to do now because
Mhm.
I don't mind spending a little bit on a bike, but you know, I'm not rich. Like I want it to be something I can be happy with for years. But
Mhm.
I do feel like there's a little bit of a through line with Cannondale. I know they've changed some ownership and they've had some iteration. I do feel like they've always been a little more upscale, a little more like really focused on like performance. So I will give them that little bit of
Was
credit.
it-
I
was it-
personally always have loved Cannondale,
Yeah.
and I've ridden a lot of
No, I have too.
Cannondales. But yeah, so I've always felt a little bit of a space in my heart for them, if you will. Like
It's always been like a very pure, like they always like kind of hung on to like traditional geometry even after
yes,
everyone kind of moved on.
Everyone
And
went the
so-
sloping top tube, the little crash triangle, you know, designs, and like they stay true. Even you look at the Tour de France now, like even their bikes, and I
Mhm.
think some of the bike brands are actually coming back to that,
Seems
like the
it,
more
yeah.
like level kind of top tube.
Mhm.
It may be slightly slanted, but I think they've been traditionally more. How to say it? They've been more consistent, being more traditional looking, even though their frames are actually very high performance, so very you know, the top carbon, the shapes are very aero, but
Mhm.
they still have, you know, it's funny when you're saying like the changes and advances with bike technology. That's all true. I 100% agree with it, but there's also this side of me that still looks at bikes like sometimes I just like days out, I'm looking at like the live tour feed and I'm watching the breakaway ride. I just kind of get a little lost in the daydream, and it's bikes are just still bikes, right? Like they haven't really
True.
changed that much
Yeah.
in like a century. So it's still two wheels. The frame is
Mhm.
more or less the same. The handlebar is still a drop bar. There, you know, in that sense, like just the big parts are still pretty much the same.
Mhm.
I kind of just love that. Like it hasn't really changed in like maybe a century.
Right.
And one thing that they've tried to change over and over again, they've tried to eliminate forever, and they can't. They just can't. They haven't figured out a way to do it, and it's the Achilles heel of the bike, the chain.
The chain.
Yeah.
The
Right.
chain. They've tried to get rid of the chain.
Yep.
They've tried to substitute it with other
Belt
things,
drives.
and they haven't figured out a better way to do it
Yep.
than a chain, which is kind of, you think about it, like wow.
But
Well, the guy from Silka, that's like his big thing. I forget his name, but he's like probably the foremost authority on bike chains. You know, the guy from Silka I'm talking
Yeah.
about. He was at SRAM. Like, I forget how he worded it, but he was basically like, the chain is like the most complex thing in the bike world. Like, you really think about what's going on with the chain. And I'm not an expert, so I won't go there, but you're right.
Yeah, the chain is
The
crazy.
chain is like
Yeah.
insane.
Mark is the first guy who pointed that out to me. You know, because like
Mark
we'd had-
Matei?
yeah,
Okay.
Mark, our old boss at
Yeah.
at Cyclesmithy. I mean, he because we had those inch pitch, bikes around, with the cogs and stuff.
Well, and Mark had a couple of God, what were they called?
Okay.
In his collection, like direct drive
direct drive
Nice.
bikes. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause, we had those
from like
around.
the 40s or something, or
'cause they-
30s.
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
where I learned that they'd been trying. They'd tried
Been
forever to try and get rid of the chain.
And they're still trying to.
But-
Don't they
yeah.
have that new giant cassette? Have you seen that one I'm talking about? There's like one. I'll show. I'm sure you've seen it, but there's some company out there. I think it's Ceramic Speed. They have this like enormous rear, like this cassette,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like trying to get rid of the chain.
It
too.
seems like that's just, but that's also like that's what's trendy now too. Is like the one by with like massive.
Yes,
Mhm.
chain rings. Yeah.
But it's interesting though too, because speaking of rabbit holes, like I've been really interested in just like the engineering of bicycles too. So like I've been watching these like YouTube videos of like, is there anything left to milk out of the bicycle in terms of,
There's always something.
but not really. The
Well-
current the crank and chain going to a cassette, that's almost about as efficient as it could be.
Oh no, I agree with you on that part, but I also feel like there's always something they're trying to get better at. Like for
Right.
example,
Well, there's always going to be incremental. I'm just saying, like
Right.
in the pure sense of like your body, like you're torquing the crank
Agree.
That energy is coming directly from your body,
Right.
going into the pedal. And there's only like two things. There's the crank and then cassette. That's it. There's no other pulleys. There's no other,
Right.
I mean, except the derailleur, but
Right.
you know what I mean? There's no other like gears in the way.
I get you.
Yeah.
I get you. Yeah.
Direct to your power goes direct to the rear
Goes
wheel.
direct to the
is
rear
that what
wheel.
I
you're
guess one
saying?
maybe a variation. Tell me if this is something totally different than what you're thinking, but maybe one variation on it, and you touched on it a second ago. So the single ring up front. So this tour is the first one I've really noticed it. I'm not the first. A lot of people notice it, but it's the first one I remember seeing. Maybe they did it in the last tour or two, but the single front chain ring on more and more bikes, including the yellow jersey, the leader of the race. I was on a single chain ring on a lot of stages. A single front chain ring, like that wasn't something you've ever seen in the modern peloton ever. And so
I was gonna say, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, so that's a thing, and I think part of it is weight. I think part of it is efficiency, chain efficiency. They've done all the measurements and the tests, and they're like, okay, we can work with this. Part of it is like not dropping chains, because going from the small to little ring, that drops chains a lot. So I'm sure there's a bunch of like performance indicators they have and all this data and wind tunnels and who knows what else. But yeah, I mean, your point's well taken. I mean, it always feels like even my bike, like it's just like tiny little things like the stiffness. They're eliminating like this, they're adding this. It's always making it just like a little bit better.
I definitely had my curmudgeon moment recently.
Nice, let's hear it.
Well, not curmudgeon, but I just remember like when I worked at Village Cycle before I went to Cycle Smithy, and the first summer I worked at Village, there was they were just trying to get rid of all those Discovery Channel Madones.
Yeah.
So they were like I forget the name of the Trek rep.
Now you could like sell those bastards.
But they were I think they were selling them to like shop employees for like $900 or $1,000. It was like, at the time it was like, holy shit.
They were just trying to move them.
Yeah.
But if you wanted a different colorway, if you wanted like a red Madone or gray, then it was like $2,000, you know. But interestingly enough, like the nicer, like the really high end Madone, Dura Ace, like even with employee discount, which in the bike industry is like very good. I don't know if it's still the same way, but it used to be like a really good discount.
Yeah.
But now, like, you know, going back to Facebook,
it all goes back to Facebook.
Those Madones that I remember like being like, man, like this is like some high tech shit. There was like a Madone with Dura Ace for like $400.
Oh yeah.
On Facebook, and I was like,
I would have.
Wow, I'm getting old.
I would have grabbed that one.
I know. I thought about it.
It was a 58. I'd have grabbed it.
Yeah, I think
just
it was.
To have it.
I think it was like a 54, 56.
Might be worth it just to part it out.
Oh, I would have.
The parts are in good shape.
Yeah.
I've spent more on dinner sometimes.
Hello, I'm Katie Lonke. You're listening to the Bills Shop Society podcast.
Will we ever get anything else in the U.S. again?
Like a tour of California or
like the tour to Georgia. Remember tour de Georgia?
You know, I see it being very difficult, right? I don't know. You know, you never want to say never.
Because Tour of California was pretty cool, though.
It was big. It was a lot of money. It was very expensive. And I think at the end of the day, you know, like the money ran out.
Well, they had Amgen, the big biotech, as their main sponsor. And once they bailed, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
So there's a really good podcast. We'll put it in the show notes, Joe. I'll send it to you. But I listened to a podcast that Adam Meyerson, someone I kind of know a bit and have followed. So one of the better known like U.S. racers. He's like our age. Anyway, he tweeted or retweeted a podcast that I'm forgetting the name of the podcast show. But anyway, whoever they are, shout out to you. But I'll put it in the notes. It was basically all about U.S. racing and why we're at the point we're at. Why all these like races have gone and vanished. And it was like all the heavy hitters. It was like John Eustace was on there. Like all these like former pros. They were like 5 or 6 people on this podcast. It was so insightful. And I meant to send it to you. I'm sorry I didn't.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
But it's really, really good. It's an hour long, so it's a quick enough listen. But they basically go through, and this you're talking about like pretty much the heavy hitters in terms of promoters and like some pros. So you're talking about some of the experts on the subject, but they talk about how I won't go into it. There's a variety of things they talk about, but basically it's like it's a little complicated. But they wanted to. Part of it was like they wanted to always be like the European model that wasn't always perfect for U.S. racing. It gets into like our system and like how USA Cycling, and maybe in some ways hasn't been super helpful. Really growing the sport as much as they could. They've been maybe focusing on the wrong things, all this kind of stuff. But I mention it because, they talk about, the Tour of California.
I imagine that like timing is probably not
Open
great
dates
either too, right? Like
the dates that are available.
And the the Euro scene is so packed. So it's like, you got to find, but they had the Tour of California. They talk about USA Pro Challenge, AKA the Tour of Colorado. They have the Philadelphia Classic. They have the
wasn't there like
tour of
like a Coors class?
Well, that was back in the day. That was the good one. That was in Colorado. American Flyers, featured that. If you haven't seen that, you should watch that. But then the tour of Utah also was a great race, really great race. So they talk about all these races; they're all gone.
Right.
So what happened? And so a lot of it is
Tour de Trump.
Tour de Trump. Yes.
Tour de Trump, was that a real thing?
Oh, that was a
real
race.
thing. Tour de Trump.
Yeah.
It was like our first American stage race.
Here's full circle. I wrote about it for Business Insider.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, well, a lot of people did, but Tour de Trump was originally, I think, Tour de Pont. And Trump bought it, and he was like, I'm going to make this. There's like quotes. He literally says this verbatim. I'm going to make this bigger than the Tour de France. He was going to have it across America, and it died in 2 years. But,
it's a glorious race.
That's Trump. Yeah.
It's the best.
So anyway, like, where were we going? So, yeah, great racing in the past. Hopefully we have another golden era ahead of us. But right now, it's like crits, which are great. There's a tour of the Gila. There's Redlands. I'm probably forgetting a couple. There's like crits. There's cyclocross. Shycross Cup is a great series. There's Cross Crusade and like Oregon. But other than that, it's a lot of like local regional stuff and like the promoters who are trying to feed that. There's a lot to say about it. But right now there's not much happening.
Part of why I ask is that maybe this is a good segue back to the very beginning of all of this conversation, is that this is obviously just completely making this up, or there's no way really maybe to quantify
Go for it.
initially, but it seems to me that cycling as a means of transportation, urban commuting, getting around the city, seems like it's probably more popular than it's ever been.
Yeah.
At least in like big cities like Chicago, Philly, San Francisco, wherever. And so it makes you wonder that, because using a bicycle in the city is kind of a gateway into following it as a sport.
Yeah,
So
it can be. I would agree with that totally. Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering if cycling is as a means of transportation and as like an urban planning principle, it seems like it's more popular and bigger than it's ever been in this country. So does that mean that cycling as a sport and
As a competitive sport?
will we see that become popular?
I don't know if it translates. I don't know that. In fact, I think that there is a bit of a rift between casual cyclists and the lycra-clad bike racer cyclist. The guy on the path less pedaled. I mean, he's nothing but driving a giant wedge between people that wear lycra and and ride carbon bikes and people that ride steel bikes for commuting. His big thing is like just kind of just campaigning against
Bike Snob is a little like that too.
Yeah, so I mean, you have these factions. It's like
it's like political. Yeah,
or even like customers who just come into the store and be like, well, I'm not a hardcore cyclist. But nobody really.
Yeah. I mean, except for like the Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
You people that classic. I'm not a Lance Armstrong or anything like that. I'm like,
thank God you're not.
Yeah, I know you're.
God bless you.
Yeah, I can tell. It's all
you're
right.
a nice person.
Yeah, but
it's a good point.
I would agree with Joe. I don't think it necessarily translates. I think there's like some of that probably, like a lot of answers in the world. It's a little complicated. Like I think there's some of that for sure.
And I think it's good. It may come about 10 years from now. So all this renewed interest in cycling
Mhm.
A lot of these people are older, like the people that have kind of rediscovered or discovered cycling tend to be 30s and up, but they have kids.
Yep.
And they're starting to involve their young children in the sport.
Mhm.
It might take a little while, but there's a lot of young kids riding bikes. They're getting their young kids riding bikes. Like I've had a lot of questions about, do you rent kids mountain bikes? Because I want to take my kid out on the trails, like that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
Or like these people that started riding, and now they're in their infancy in cycling, right? They're like 2-3 years into it. So imagine when you were into it, when you were just 2 or 3 years into the sport, the
Right.
stuff you're learning, how enthusiastic you are. I want to
love that.
I want to get a different bike. I want to get a new bike.
Well,
I'm reading the
it is-
magazines.
It is interesting to see like the evolution, even just in my lifetime. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, in the 90s, yeah, it was like John Greenfield and the bike messengers and the
Mhm.
Gen X kind of weirdos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like when I was in college, then it was kind of like the hipster
Right.
bike messenger culture.
And I guess what I'm saying is that
But
now
now
it's
it's
like
like
on
everybody.
brand. Yeah,
Now it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
like on Twitter, at least in Chicago,
Right,
it's
yeah.
like, my God, the bicycling stuff, it's huge.
Yeah.
but they're not racing, so they're not
Right.
race centric. I would say that the sweet spot for all these new cyclists is bike touring and
Right.
adventure. So they all want to go long distance, they want to go camping, they want to intermodal
Yep,
riding.
yep.
Their next step, because they're older riders, right? They're not 17.
They have
looking
no interest in racing
They
whatsoever.
have no interest in racing. That's already.
And-
It's
behind
about
them.
like getaways, weekends, friends bonding.
Clear the
It's about
mind.
the experience.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
about like
And I want to go on the record and say
camping and
I bought my Trek 520 brand new
Uh-huh.
in 2007
yeah.
with my employee discount, and I got made fun of all the time for having a touring bike as my primary
Yeah.
bike.
Look
Now
at those
you're-
suckers
At
now.
that time,
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. Touring. Well,
People made like legitimately got like the cool messenger kids on their like
Yeah.
track bikes. They like
Now they got blown out knees.
yeah.
Well, now they're riding touring bikes.
Yeah.
That is the
No,
cool
they're
stuff.
riding gravel bikes.
Yeah,
Riding
gravel,
gravel
yeah.
bikes.
Get it
right.
clear.
Which
all
is
right?
which is a touring
Which
bike.
is a touring bike. Yeah, that's all it is. It's
We've talked about it on the show.
lipstick and rouge on
Yeah,
a touring bike.
yeah.
That's all it is. So it's that's all it is. So yeah,
The bike industry definitely has a snake oil problem for sure.
Yeah.
And always has.
It's got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
it's we love it and it's crazy and
and it's succeeding right now, despite all of its all the way it tries to kill itself all the time. Just people. It's too good a thing to fail sometimes.
Mhm.
And right now is one of those times where it's just like it's really people that are kind of driving the sport, not really the industry.
Mhm.
The
yeah.
industry's kind of reacting.
The industry kind of eats its young sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's interesting too is like I've noticed is that brands are not trendy anymore. It seems like among casual
I feel like it's
to a degree.
I
Like
think it's influencers, even in cycling, are like driving it. Like it's like
Yeah.
certain like if you want to talk about racing, which I don't think is like the majority of it, but I
Mhm.
think racing, the influencers there, like the Van der Poels, those types. But then like in terms of just like regular riding, it's like just kind of like random. I follow like a handful on Instagram or something like that. So I think they like promote a lot of it too, and they get some stuff for it. Gravel in the U.S. is like a particularly like big thing too the past several years for sure.
Mhm.
So there's like a handful of riders who really push that. I mean, guys like Phil Guyman, he's kind of a big influencer, and there, it's a bit of a mix like that. And you have like obviously we've had him on the show, Ultra Romance,
Mm-hmm.
big influencer too.
There's it's like lifestyle stuff now.
Yeah.
And I guess
it's not so much and sometimes not even that much the equipment.
I guess that's what I
Right.
mean. I guess that's what I meant by saying that is that it's sort of like 90s mountain bike versus a specific
Mhm.
brand.
Right.
Even though like, yeah, we mentioned stump jumpers and stuff like that, but like, 2008, 2009, it was like there were hot brands,
Mhm.
Right.
Soma or
Yes.
who
like
else?
like what do you ride?
like-
yeah. Now
Yeah.
I agree. Like no, now it is like it's like the personal persona branding influencer or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Like it's like kind of like they could be riding anything. They could be riding Canyon, Cannondale. It doesn't matter. Like it's like what are you doing? Like are you pushing this cause? Are you doing that cause? Like, what kind of clothes are you wearing? Like, what kind of adventures are you going on? Like,
and the
there's a lot of that, which, some of it's just bullshit. It's just fucking marketing. But some of it's actually like kind of cool and interesting. And
YouTube and Instagram, I think, has something to do with it because people are learning a lot about what's real and what's not real. So like some of the marketing bullshit from the bike companies is just like, there's enough people out there saying the same thing where it's like that doesn't really matter.
Well, I think also too, like, you mentioned this, and I don't know if, how much further, if this is maybe for some other future time, but, like, you and I, Joe, we had a phone call earlier this year where we talked about just like how big DIY is in cycling now too. And like, even the fact that I'm even like, when I worked at Cycle Smithy, no one let me near a bike stand. No one let me near.
Was there like an alarm that went off when you approached one? Like,
yeah, basically Earl and Kelly be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get out of here. The fact that I'm now like I'm learning how to like build bike, like take a bike down, all everything apart.
That's amazing.
Rebuilding wheel hubs, like the fact that I want to build my own.
If they could see you now,
family, cargo bike. It's like the barrier to this is so much lower now just because of Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, and especially with those bikes, right? And I think that's like that's the beauty of those old bikes, those 90 bikes. That's what really makes them attractive is that they are so serviceable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had one in the shop today, and little Isa, the 18-year-old girl that's been working at the bike shop since she was 14 or 15, right? Like today, it was a big step for her. I handed her a wheel. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we've been showing her bits and pieces and she's been chaining them along and building up to this moment. But like a bike came in and it had a broken spoke and it had needed a new cassette. And, over the last few weeks, I've been teaching her how to true a wheel and I showed her how to cut a spoke and I showed her how to put a spoke in. She's been watching.
It's pretty legit.
And I've been teaching her how to do that stuff. And today, like this wheel comes in and I'm like, here, I've shown you how to do every one of these things. Now do it all. And she, big smile popped out on her face. I'm like, just let me know if you run into any problems. And she did it.
Nice.
And she trued the wheel, and it was like
wow.
the most satisfying thing. At some point I had to walk over to the truing stand and I'm like, that's enough. It's
well, I think before
$30 wheel.
Don't make it too true.
You've been working on it for an hour.
Yeah.
But it's all right. It's
right.
like, learn how to do it. And it's just like to see the joy in somebody's eyes as they learn, and they're like, oh my God, if I tighten this spoke, the wheel goes this way. Or I tighten
the apprentice,
the spoke. Yeah.
And,
that's great.
But that's the whole point is like before you had Mark or Joe or Earl or Kelly showing you how to do this.
Yeah.
Or before like how accessible information is now, but like you had to have someone show you because otherwise
you have to go to shop. Yeah.
Otherwise, building a wheel is like alchemy. Like you see this and you're like, how does this work?
Yeah. It's always been like this weird thing, even around the bike shop. Even for someone like me. Yeah.
Total alchemy is the correct word. And like, you get to it. Like anyone who's tried to like true a wheel, it's like, oh, it's counterintuitive. Like you sure it's this way to do what? Like it's a whole thing, and the dishing, don't even go into that. Like there's so much to it.
And even
like
frame
art.
Building was like this kind of very mystique, magical thing. But
I think for a lot of people, it still is.
It still is, but it is interesting. And I will say, going to the Waterford factory and seeing it just be
workshop.
It's literally just like a what do you call it?
Machine shop.
It's just a single level aluminum siding.
Yeah.
Building.
Yep.
Yeah.
With machine. It's a machine shop. It's
like it is a machine shop,
and it's just like a regular light, like it just kind of almost seemed like it's the kind of place where you think about like in World War II.
Yeah.
Like
all that B-roll that you've seen growing up, that's where they shot it.
Every single little small.
It's like anvils and drills and tubes and everything's like got a coat of like dust, and there's a bit of ancient air.
Not a single waxed mustache in the place.
Well, right. Well, what I was gonna say is
no tattoos.
No,
there wasn't one tattoo.
No. What I was gonna say is like in World War II, like every single little small industrial, like low industrial, they would have been like making small R, or
right.
The government would have said no more bicycles. You're making
Grenades.
artillery
Yeah.
cannons now, or,
Right.
You know,
rifle
so-
butts or something.
Right.
And the
right?
light
Yeah.
was coming in. It was like this ancient light, this little dust falling, and you look over, and there's like this whole like paint section,
Yeah.
and like you can't go in there without a mask, and it was like very real. You're right. It was totally real. Like I remember someone just commenting. I think I was like making a little video at the time, but it was like, this is like real material, and there's like real tools and machinery, and there's like bits, and there's this, and it was like you're in a machine shop,
Yeah,
and
machine shop. Yeah.
it was. I kind of feel like I don't know if I'll ever be in a place like this again. Not to sound overly romantic, but like my carbon frames are all made in Taiwan now. Like I don't know if I'll ever be in a shop like that.
But you know what's wild
Yeah.
is those little shops like that. There used to be one right here where
You're
these
kidding.
townhouses are. There used
Really?
to be the Walgreens used to be
Oh, right.
light industrial.
Yeah.
This whole neighborhood used to be all light industrial.
I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah, and and then on the flip side, my friend Andres, the guy who's I'm working on
Mhm.
with these frame projects.
Your man in
And
Spain.
yeah, my man in Spain in the frame school. He is totally of the mind that you could build frames in your basement. With very
Right.
simple equipment, and and he's all about teaching people how to do it on with the least amount of equipment necessary, and he believes it's a simple process. It really is a simple process that for whatever reason in the bike world has always been made out to be this really difficult thing, but it's really
Mhm.
just gluing 9 tubes together, sticking
It's-
9 tubes together in a straight way, and that there's a way to his whole thing is there's a way to teach that,
Yeah.
do it, and be able to ride a good bike when you're done, and that's his whole philosophy.
It's literally the same thing with music in production and engineering,
Mhm.
where it was like, there are some studios where it like that console is worth millions of dollars because when they built those consoles, they were all hand wired and they weren't the same. Everyone was very different from each other. And so like
They all have their own.
they all had their own soul, and it was sort of like the console that's in this studio
Yep.
belongs in this studio, or maybe they'll sell it, but it's going to be
Like Zeppelin had one, Eagles had one, The Who had one. They were all unique to that band, or
well, no, not to the bands, but like to the studio and like I can't remember the famous one in London, but like
Abbey Road.
Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, right? Like where the Beatles played.
Oh, gotcha. So whoever
Or-
recorded in there's probably
or-
sound you can like
or
find.
like Music City, USA, like where Motown recorded,
Gotcha,
or like
gotcha.
or Nashville. So, but anyways, it was like studios were, to build one was like millions and millions and gajillions of dollars.
Right.
But now you can just, you have GarageBand on your computer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you can download Pro Tools,
Right.
or I don't know what people use today, but it democratized being able to record and engineer your own music.
Yep.
Because the information's out there.
And the information's there,
auto tune.
but the tools are cheap and accessible now. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with bicycles, like
Mhm.
frame building, in the sense where it's like, when I was in college, I would have never thought, well, where the hell would you buy a welding machine, like
Mhm.
a welder?
Right.
Yeah,
But now I can just go to Harbor Freight or order one from Amazon.
yeah.
That's
They're like
crazy.
$200.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You can get
You
a
know?
torch. You can braze. You can do
Yeah.
all sorts. Yeah, I mean it's and you can go to YouTube and watch Cobra frame building or one of those places, and they teach you exactly how to do it.
They show you, and it's fascinating because it's like, I mean, welders still make a lot of money.
Mhm.
Like welding was one of those high
Kind of
earning trades. I think certain like
certain types of welding.
certain types of welding,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
but it's just wild where it's like, again, I'm watching these videos of these guys building these cargo bikes, and
Right.
Yeah, with some real basic skills you can do. I took a class. I took a welding class because when we were rehabbing a house and fixing a house, I got an estimate to do railings for the house, like steel railings, and it was like super high. It was like, oh my god, that's really expensive.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned to a friend, and he's like, yeah, there's this place in Chicago in Ukrainian Village, and you can go to school. They'll teach you how to weld in 2 nights, and then you buy a membership and you can go weld. And so I went there, I visited the guy, and I showed him pictures of what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And he's like, are you handy with tools? I'm like, yeah, I'm a bike mechanic. He's like, yeah, you have no problem building that stuff. I can show you how to weld. And, you just cut some tubes and stick them together.
That's
You
amazing.
got no angles and sure enough, I built all the railings and all the, I did a bunch of metal work.
That's
there.
amazing. You save thousands.
Yeah, I
Well-
saved thousands, and I learned how to weld. More
Right.
importantly, like I learned how to fabricate.
Well, right.
Which
Learn
is-
how to fish.
which-
and that's the whole point. It's like, yeah, I could record an album in my apartment, and it would sound great.
Yeah.
Or I could hopefully learn how to weld because I want to learn how to not only build a cargo bike, but
I would strongly recommend going to the school.
well,
Like,
so I
just taking a
want to
class.
because I was going to also give you.
I'll go too.
I was going to ask like a quick little trivia question for you guys.
Uh-oh. Here we
So
go.
like 2-3 years ago, I got a couple quotes for a wrought iron fence here,
Yeah.
50 feet wide. How much would you guess?
From where? From to cross that? Or in the front?
of the house.
Front.
50 feet,
50
Yeah,
feet.
yeah.
Okay.
So
From your
it's-
to cover your property, your 2 lots.
2.
Okay.
So it's 50 by 125, but just for the 50 in the front.
Gotcha.
Mhm. I know. I have a rough idea.
So that includes material and installation, the whole thing.
It's everything.
soup to nuts.
And they would fabricate it.
Mhm.
It's probably going to be crazy, but I'm going to guess 20 grand.
No, that's too much.
Okay.
I-
12.
I was in the 12 to 15.
It was like 6, 7, 8,000.
How many years
between
ago
the
though?
quotes. That
It's
was
still-
like
it's still a lot.
that was like 2-3 years
2 or
ago.
3 years
That's still
ago.
a ton of money.
Yeah,
So
right.
now it probably actually would be closer to 10 maybe.
Yeah.
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 It's still a ton of money. I always go high just because
Yeah.
I always lose those.
Well, we're getting on. We're starting to get into fence building.
Hour 7. Wow, I love how we came into fence building.
Well, we could talk
What,
all
what do you think? What do you think the quote
Hey
was? the
man,
estimate for this?
millennials, we got to find side hustles.
How
you
much
know?
for that?
I got to pay my property taxes somehow.
Hours later, you know what they wanted for this
doubling.
foundation?
Oh my God! Hey, I want to put new sod.
Well, I was
down.
just going to tell you guys about my friend who got estimated for a new garage for 65 grand. But
Whew.
we'll leave that for another show.
Whoa!
I'm like, let's build it
My-
ourselves.
Just build
Let's
a
go to
little
Home
house,
Depot.
yeah.
So final thing, my dad called me the other day. He's like, "Hey, we got a quote for new windows. Want to guess how much?"
Oh, no.
I was like, I don't know, like 60, 70. It's a pretty big house in Florida. He
Jesus.
said it was $250,000
For fucking windows.
for new windows.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fucking kidding me.
Well, because they have to be like stormproof and stuff down
Yeah.
there, right?
Jesus
Yeah,
and it's a
Christ.
lot of windows too.
At that point, you move out of Florida.
Yeah.
I'm like,
really?
I'm like, were you guys going to pay cash or home equity or like what? How are you going to do this?
Powerball.
I'm like, you might want to just wait for like interest rates to go down a little
How
bit and then
about
refinance. and
Powerball,
then do
baby.
that, you know.
Jeez, man.
But anyways,
It's been a blast.
Oh my
been
God, it's
real.
been a blast.
So
from
good
the-
to
I
catch
feel like
up,
this
man.
went so fast, but it's probably super long for listeners.
Yeah,
but
we're 3 hours in.
coming from Chicago, AJ's backyard, the
That's
cicadas have gone to bed.
Yeah.
We're still up, but this
But
has been amazing.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, AJ. We got to do this more.
thank you.
A little bit
Yeah.
more often.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the bug spray and
Yeah,
setting us
for
up
hosting.
here, and this has been super fun.
Yeah, we'll be back soon. This is it was good catching up with you, Danny.
Catch up with you, Joe, and
Thanks, AJ.
Thanks, guys.
rock and roll.
Adios.